Okay, the April 1 meeting of the Matanuska-Susitna School Board is coming to the order at 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you determine a quorum?
Okay. I'm going to call the roll, so we'll give you a second to unmute. Ryan Ponder.
Here.
Ole Larson.
Here.
Jim Hart.
Here.
Kelsey Trimmer.
Here.
Jeff Taylor.
Here.
Tom Berge.
Present.
And I, too, am present. Sarah Welton. And I have the board goals and the vision and mission statement. Matsu Borough School District will be a model of excellence in teaching, learning, and engaging all students. The mission: Matsu Borough School District prepares all students for success. Beliefs: we believe that the needs and best interests of students drive all decisions. All students can and want to learn. Educational choices and community participation are essential to student success. Our goals: improve student success, achievement, and performance. Develop excellent educators and leaders. Use innovative practices to improve the education system. Include families and community members in the education of our students. Promote safe and healthy environments for all. Our guiding principles. Our guiding principles will drive our decisions and our responsibility to our students, families, and communities. And those are stewardship, accountability, empathy, quality, integrity, respect, collaboration, and commitment.
Okay, let's stand for the pledge, please. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Who seconded that?
Jim Hart.
Okay, the motion has, agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any objection? Hearing none, we will move on to guidelines for public participation and testimony. Dr. Goyette.
Yes, so last board meeting, the board extended telephonic testimony to include non-agenda items. And we do have guidance on the board documents that in order, persons wishing to provide testimony telephonically must sign up no later than 3 p.m. the day of the meeting by calling or emailing School Board Administrative Assistant Stacy Escobedo. And last meeting, I had talked about a limitation on being able to call in. That was through Zoom, and that is a limit just on calling in for testimony. There is no limit on how many people can view the meeting at the same time. And so I wanted to clarify that so that there should be no issue with people being able to view the meeting going on.
Moving on to persons to be heard on non-agenda items.
Public comment pertaining to education on non-agenda items is limited to 3 minutes per person per meeting. There will be up to 1 hour for persons to be heard. Public comment on agenda items will be taken at the time the item is considered. This is your opportunity to be heard, and the board will not respond to your comments. As per Board Policy 1312, individuals testifying may not discuss complaints against individual employees. Specifically, under the agenda item persons to be heard on non-agenda items, the following guidelines apply. The speaker states his or her name for the record. The speaker is limited to 3 minutes per meeting. The speaker is limited to non-agenda items. Agenda items will be open for public comment as they appear on the agenda. The speaker's comment should be appropriate for all audiences, including school-aged children. The speaker is limited to comments of a general nature, positive or negative, which may not be attributable to any specific individual. Issues involving concerns specific to any single individual should be submitted in writing and given to the board clerk to be resolved. The issue may be determined to be appropriate for persons to be heard, or may be handled in executive session, or may be routed through a more appropriate complaint process. No disturbance or willful interruption of any board meeting shall be permitted. Persistence by an individual or group shall be grounds for the chair to terminate the privilege of addressing the meeting. The board may remove disruptive individuals and order the room cleared if necessary. This is not a question and answer time. The speakers may be referred to the superintendent or designee, or the board may take the issue under advisement. Maximum of 1 hour per meeting, and this is the first half hour. The second half hour is later in the meeting. Nobody?
Okay, we are going to move to the telephonic testimony. First person that I have on the list is Miss Diane Scheib. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, my name is Diane K. Scheib, and I'm the president of the Mat-Su Education Association. This week, our members have continued to go above and beyond in serving our students and even our community. Nurses are all helping with food distribution for the district and also working with the food banks and helping kids covered with their needs. Nurses have been making phone calls to students that are in need and providing lists of resources to families. The nurses, along with the speech paths and the OTPTs who have appropriate degrees for working in hospitals, are standing by, ready to assist when the call comes. Zoom meetings and Google Classroom are substituting now for classes, but educators have been able to keep many classroom routines continuing. Classes are still starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Adam Ames is still having his Houston High middle school students participating in good things. Susan Brunner at Colony High School has even succeeded in getting their yearbook pages completed and back on track to get published. Our tech-savvy members, John Notestein and Brian Mead, are working with Reese Everett to ensure our seniors have a memorable and meaningful graduation. The Meadow Lakes elementary teachers had a car parade for their students. They drove through the various neighborhoods where their students live. They waved and shouted greetings and let the students know that they are missed. Teacher Radona Grazio gave a shout-out on Facebook to her amazing Sherrod Elementary colleagues. She said that they're doing whatever it takes to support families, such as phone calls into the evening, packing up books, curbside delivery of belongings, planning and preparing for remote learning. Ms. Grazio expressed her appreciation for our district and for her principal, Lori Cook, for being a resourceful, supportive, and amazingly organized leader. She also added, Dr. Monica Goyette, you're a rock star and you're my hero. I wish I could tell you about every amazing act of kindness and professionalism that I have had the privilege to witness as this crisis has unfolded. Fortunately, several of our members have agreed to speak tonight about what is going on in their schools. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Jackie Cunningham, are you on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay, I wanted to let you know I am Jackie Cunningham. I teach special education at Colony High School, and I wanted to let you know what all of the special ed teachers in this district are doing. They're doing everything they can to reach out to parents, to students, to make sure that they are able to access the curriculum. There are many of our students that need individualized instructions, and our teachers are making themselves available through Google Hangouts, Zoom, email, calling them directly over the telephone to provide assistance. Teachers are coming up with creative ways to demonstrate and stay in touch with their classes. We are also using traditional ways for students without internet capabilities, such as paper and pencil distribution. Special ed teachers are making amendments each day to their IEP to show that they are receiving services in the areas that they need, such as reading, writing, and math. We are amending the setting, the amount of time that is typically provided during the normal school day, and finding new ways to meet the goals for each student. Individualized education plans continue to be created by our special education teachers. These are team meetings, which include a special education teacher, a regular education teacher, a district rep, parents or guardians, and the student. We are meeting through Zoom, which provides us with a secure way of sharing documents and the opportunity for group conference regarding the student's needs. Teachers are assisting each other by providing training with technology. For example, we have teachers that are teaching other coworkers how to use Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, Google Hangouts, and Google Classroom. We are providing students with the ability to access programs such as Read and Write on personal computers. This Read and Write program allows computers to read the text to the students who need that accommodation. Teachers are continuing to modify and make accommodations for students with needs. Special education teachers in our district are using technology to demonstrate how to complete work such as do math problems, follow the steps to a writing essay. They're putting videos on computers. They're Zooming with their students. They're having one-on-one conversations with their students. These special ed teachers are working hard and dedicated to meeting the needs of all students, and I'm very proud of each special ed coworker that I have. Thank you.
Is there a Miss Tammy Fisher on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, and thank you for being here. My name is Tammy Fisher. I'm a mother and a teacher here in the Mountain View District. I couldn't be prouder of how our families, our teachers, and our leaders have come together during this time. I wanted to take a minute to share with you a few of the wonderful things that are happening in our district and in our school. My son is a student at Palmer Junior Middle School, and I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Allen and to his staff for their flexibility and for keeping us informed of the things going on at school. I'm grateful to work in a district and at a school that has teachers and leadership that realizes the importance of keeping our schools and our communities connected while still providing an education for all of our students. Out at Sutton, we are meeting as a staff every morning via Zoom so we can discuss the needs of our school and our community. Our principal, like many others in our district, starts the day with a Facebook Live so she can pass on pertinent information to our families and to our community. We have had many homeschool families joining us during this Facebook Live. During this time, our principal is also doing a read aloud for the children to enjoy, and she is wishing students a happy birthday and starting their school day with a Pledge of Allegiance. Like other schools, we have rearranged title funding for things such as books and math manipulatives to be used as planned, but in an in-home learning environment, so we can continue to give our students those hands-on learning experiences. Our teachers, including myself, have created online classrooms, are maintaining daily office hours, and meeting with students via Zoom to teach and to answer questions multiple times a week in order to keep our school community learning and connected. As a member of our trauma-sensitive team, I reach out to our families throughout the week with scheduled phone calls. Our classified staff is making food and material deliveries as needed. Again, despite the worries and concerns our communities are facing, I am proud to be an educator in this community. Please stay safe, stay well, and stay home. Thank you for your time.
Yes, is Miss Kathleen Yerbich, please.
Yep, I'm Kathleen Yerbich. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Kathleen Yerbich, and I'm a teacher at American Charter. I would like the board to know a few good things that are happening in our educational community. So let's start with a pig story. Today, my students began their morning viewing a video of my pet pig, Blaze. He had some bling attached to his pen to help me introduce the writing prompt of the day. This is the third teaching assignment that he has helped me facilitate. After filming, I uploaded to my Google Classroom and attached it to the topic of writing prompts and then titled it Blazing New Trails. This was all made possible by Mr. Notestein and his YouTube Google tutorials. Mr. Notestein is a teacher at Wasilla High. I just happened to see a post on our MSBA Union Facebook page that spoke about his tutorials. I viewed both his beginning and advanced Google Classroom several times. As you know, my life as a classroom teacher changed in a moment. I never had a Google Classroom, but now I do, and it has given me the gift of communication with my students and family. It has allowed me to continue to teach. I also want to thank a teacher named Mrs. Drake, who takes phone calls from me and my families, helping us figure out this vast new world of online teaching. There's also the IT guy, Dominic. He has always been a tremendous help with his knowledge of technology, but now as my laptop becomes my lifeline to teach, I appreciate him even more. One last good item is a sixth grade student at our school, Amelia Hoke. She is sewing masks for nurses in our community. Mr. Notestein, Mrs. Drake, Dominic, and Amelia Hoke are giving their time and sharing their knowledge and talents to help us through these difficult days. It makes me proud to be a member of the Mat-Su educational community. Thank you.
And Ms. Mary Doohere, are you online?
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. Okay, boy, I'll be honest with you. 3 minutes is enough, but I'll go for it. Hello to Superintendent Monica Goyette and the Mat-Su Borough School District School Board. My name is Mary Dewar. I am a speech-language pathologist since the fall of 2010 in the Mat-Su Borough School District. Tonight, I want to share with you updates from your related service staff who work with the Student Support Services Department. The speech-language pathologists and assistants, occupational therapists, physical therapists and assistants, and the school psychologists, the vision teachers, audiologists, adaptive physical education teachers, the assistive technology department, and school nurses. Even though the doors are currently closed to our schools, our work continues to help children access their curriculum and meet the requirements of FAPE and IDEA. Some of your related service providers are at one site, but most of us work with students at multiple sites. We have connections with students, parents, guardians, general education teachers, including special teachers, special education teachers, and for our more significantly disabled children, we have connections with medical providers. And let me reassure you, during this time of school closures, we are still working and making these connections, most of us at home, some still scattered at schools practicing physical and social distance. Your related service providers are here for their students that are still in need of special education services. 3 minutes is simply not enough time to express to you what I wish that I could, that your related service providers continue to meet our job requirements in addition to adapting to meet the needs of our students as best as we can during this time of COVID-19. Many of these previous and now current job responsibilities overlap across the board for many of your providers. We continue to meet compliance deadlines by working on reports for evaluations, IEPs, and now COVID-19 IEP amendments for all students that we work with. We continue to communicate with colleagues by drafting and responding to a large number of emails. We are in contact with parents by phone and email. We now know how to Zoom and frequently do so as we work together to meet the needs for our students and staff. We gather and disseminate resources for students and staff that we work with. Some therapists will be working via teletherapy, while others are currently preparing for and producing therapy videos that will be available for all families to access. And God bless the therapists and related service providers that try to educate so many of us on what Google Classrooms is. Also, there's a special place in heaven for those educators that juggle their workload while trying to care for their young children and or educate their primary and secondary age children. Ladies and gentlemen in the Mat-Su Borough, your related service providers are here for your children, and Superintendent Goyette and school board members, you can be proud that these teams are true professionals. Thank you so much.
Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to address the board at this time? Okay. Okay, moving on. Borough and city reports. Is there anybody online from borough or city? Nope. Okay, moving on from there. Administrative reports or remote learning update. Dr. Goyette?
Yeah, it's my pleasure to hand this over to Assistant Superintendent of Instruction, Amy Spargo. I've asked Ms. Spargo to be prepared to do an admin report over the next several weeks to keep the board apprised of our transition to a remote delivery model.
Good evening, President Berge, Dr. Goyette, Dr. Welton, members of the board online. It is exciting that I get to give this report on the status of remote learning in the Mat-Su Borough. We have been closed to students since spring break and have been able to pivot to a completely different delivery of instruction in a short amount of time. And the reason we were able to pivot so quickly is because this board has prioritized blended learning. For the last 4 years, this board has really encouraged us and set goals and objectives for us to be innovative. And the work that's been done in support of those goals and objectives has really allowed our teachers to have the opportunity to learn as they go along and now apply that when we need it most. It's not moving. I tried that. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk to you about what remote learning looks like, and you've heard testimony from some of our teachers, and so you have some clear examples in your mind of how hard they're working and what they're doing. I'm going to talk about what it looks like in our district, how the different school sites themselves have adopted the model, how we're monitoring student learning and making sure that it's effective and that kids are making progress. How are students being graded? How are we communicating that progress, what kids know and are able to do to families? What about our students with specialized needs? Are we adjusting and providing an equitable opportunity to learn? And then what are the next steps? So remote learning is, it is not homeschool. It is teacher designed and supported student learning from home during a school closure that is personalized to meet student and family needs. The district has been building capacity to offer student-centered, personalized learning for the past 4 years. All of the professional development opportunities in our district for the last 4 years have focused on integrating digital content, targeted instruction, student ownership and goal setting, and data-driven decisions. This professional development, thousands and thousands of hours, has prepared us to be able to deliver embedded instruction that's available 24 hours a day from home. For fourth quarter, we've asked teachers to have clearly defined objectives and focused priorities and a transparent process to demonstrate mastery. Through an individual family needs assessment, schools were able to customize delivery systems to meet the learner and family needs. Mostly organized online via Google Classroom or other learning management systems, but many students are preferring and families are preferring traditional work with paper and pencil. Our remote learning includes schools that are all digital, schools that are all traditional, and most schools are blended. We, as you know, we reported last board meeting that students were allowed to come to the school under safe conditions and check out devices. We're proud to report that on March 29th, we had 5,955 sign-ons on district devices outside of our network. So we know that kids are logging into their Google Classrooms, that they are hard at work, and that of the devices that were checked out, kids are using them. Most of this, you can see the numbers next to the schools for the number of devices they've checked out. We're starting to have our first run of issues with devices, and we're constantly working through what it means and what it looks like to be blended. But what we do know is that as teachers are moving to this, we've had to provide about over 20 professional development sessions so far to help teachers navigate their Google Classrooms, but that is just a drop in the bucket compared to what's being done. We know that already we have 4,500 Google Classrooms set up, and so that work was already done, and now we're using that work. In order to kind of give some rules of the road, we wanted to create a framework for teachers to design their lessons around. So our goal is that seat work or academics should be about 2 hours a day. It's really hard for a student to sit home in all those different conditions and with a lot going on and focus on seat work. And so the electives in the career and technical classes have moved to project-based learning and activity-based learning, and things that the whole family can be involved in. We know that learning feedback that causes a lot of stress if everything is graded, and yet people are unsure of what's expected of them because it's the first time they've tried this model. So we've really stressed that there needs to be frequent and ungraded feedback to families and to kids, to students. That's happening face-to-face in Zoom. It's happening in Google Hangouts. It's happening online through Google Classroom and the ways teachers can comment. So that is a theme in all that we do so that people are building their confidence to continue with this model. Our district has adopted curriculum and programs that we support from the Office of Instruction. We've given lots of training on these in advance of this school closure. We're able to monitor the minutes and the objectives mastered from a distance on all these programs, and so teachers are able to see what their students are doing. They're able to see where they're having problem, which objectives are bogging them down, and then target that assistance to those specific areas. Using Alex for math and Lexia for language, teachers are doing small group instruction on Zoom based on the data that they're getting back from student work online. I'll also add that Alex is the software or the online platform that the University of Alaska uses to assess students in math for coursework to be ready to take college-level coursework, and that a lot of our high schools have gotten additional licenses so that students can be prepping for college. And to date, since the closure, we've added 1,900 Alex licenses that started last week. Everyone needs support. It's a tough time. And we know that our system of remote learning is built on teachers. Teachers are the foundation of everything that's happening right now. And so creating a system of support would have been really challenging if we had to, again, pull this out of thin air in a matter of weeks. But luckily, one of the things that Dr. Goyette started 4 years ago was she had the innovative idea of having digital first responders in our schools. And those are some of our best, most capable technological wizards in the school. And rather than hiring people extra, we are paying stipends to teachers, 1 or 2 or 3, even in the biggest schools, to have extra training and to be available after school and during lunches and during prep times and do staff development to be able to support teachers. Well, those digital first responders, you heard them called out by name in the testimony. They are the front line of support for our teachers, and they're people who know their school and know their systems and are really able to help. And then each school is assigned an educational technologist at the Office of Instruction, and that's under the leadership of Justin Ainsworth. And they are all working with individual online platforms and providing PD. They've been zooming into staff meetings and really guiding whole large groups of people through the online process of remote learning. And then finally, the Office of Instruction has been mobilized to really do ongoing needs assessment and professional development for our classified employees who are home at this time, working from home. And there's a lot of different pieces that we've picked up to ensure that from everything from procuring a lot more software licenses to ensuring that we have the devices that kids need. We're just facilitating that from afar. Communications is the name of the game. You heard people talk about that. These are just some fun stats to say that we're doing business differently. The district has Zoom enterprise licenses for administrators, and in the last couple of weeks, we've held 347 meetings, and we are spending a lot of time talking to each other online to make this happen. Google Teams is our system internally of collaborating in person and on documents. Google Suite, I said Microsoft Team. Google Suite is a place where we have video hangouts that students can gather as a class. It's kind of like Google's version of Zoom. And it integrates with Google Classroom and assignments, and so that use is through the roof. Another thing we've noticed is that people are still relying on good old email, and our email received and sent is more than doubled since we started this process. We have challenges with communication, though. We have not got communication figured out, and I would say out of all the areas that we're still trying to dial in, this is one that we are working at. And what we know is that when everyone's pushing out communication to from all their teachers, if they have multiple children in multiple schools, that families are being overwhelmed by the amount of messages they're getting. So we're working on finding ways to coordinate student communication so that families don't get so many messages in a day. One of the ways we're planning to do that is we're also working with communicating on adult learning and how adults who are in the home can get fluent with some of these technology platforms that their kids are using so that they can log on and not have to rely just on emails. So we know that learning is social, and the structures and routines of a classroom contribute to increased productivity. And in the absence of those structures and routines, learning sometimes takes a little bit more time. And so as we're working this out, we've encouraged our teachers to think about students needing extra time to master objectives, and that we need to focus really on what is essential for success at the next level. What objectives build on other objectives the next year and in the next course, and really think about how will students have multiple opportunities to learn and demonstrate mastery. Examples might be, we don't want to have everything be graded all week long like it might be in a class, because we don't know what's happening to families throughout the week. So there might be lots of opportunities to practice through the week, and then on Friday there would be an assessment that a parent could help a student with, take a picture of it, drop it into the Google Classroom, or text it through the Remind app to the teacher, and that's how assessment can take place. So there's not things going back and forth every day. It just gets to be overwhelming. We also know that while kids are in Google Classroom, that parents are their primary source of progress monitoring is through Parent View, our student information system. And so we've asked teachers that even though they're communicating with kids regularly in the Google Suite, that they still take time to communicate with parents about student academic progress once a week in Parent View. Grading has been a work in progress, and I think we're getting some clarity around that. As with all things in our district, we've had very high expectations and very clear or very high parameters for how once a student's enrolled in a class, what their options are if they choose not to continue in that class. And after 4 weeks, you are not allowed to drop a class without getting an F on your transcript in our district, and that's supported by Board Policy 5121. Well, that just didn't make a lot of sense in this time of flexibility and grace, because we just don't know what's happening with all of our kids. And the last thing we wanted was for a global pandemic to impact their future in a way like lowering their GPA, changing their class ranking, making them ineligible for sports. And so we had to find a way to articulate some rules of the road around grading and adding some clarity to our admin regulations about how we're going to apply those processes. So our rules of the road are that there needs to be work graded in reading, writing, and math, and that the curriculum needs to be moving forward. And in all those courses that are credit earning, that those teachers really have to have graded work that is going to be represented on a report card. Classes that wouldn't maybe have graded work would be citizenship, civics, not civics in high school, but like in elementary school citizenship, Music, PE in elementary school might not be graded. If it was a credit class in high school, it would be graded. So they're providing learning opportunities, they're providing feedback, but they're not necessarily providing letter grades in those areas. We know that in areas where students are getting grades, that families need to be informed from the beginning what they need to do to get an A, what they need to do to get a B. And we also have instituted the option of allowing students to get a pass instead of a letter grade. If things are really challenging and there's a lot of extenuating circumstances in your home, we don't want you to feel like you're going to get a D or a C when you're an AB student and it would ruin your GPA, that a pass is not included in your GPA calculation, and it would allow you to demonstrate that you finished a class, got credit for it, but you don't have it as part of your GPA. And then the NG is a way that instead of an F, if we don't know why kids are failing, we're not walking this road with them every minute of every day like they are in the classroom. And so if a student just cannot have the either the human or the technological or whatever is getting in the way of them participating in the course, they can get an NG to show that they just didn't get graded. We still have students in our district who have not, we have not been able to make contact with since this started. Hundreds of students who we've not been able to make contact with. And we're calling and emailing and texting and reaching out every day. And there are some families that are just greatly impacted by this pandemic in ways that we can't even really imagine. And so we don't want kids to have that follow them around on their transcript forever as a failing grade. Finally, I mentioned that students need to be able to drop classes and have them removed from their transcript so that it doesn't have a black mark for a time that something that happened educationally that was out of their control. Around the country, people are talking about free and public education, providing FAPE for all of our students, and that it has to be equitable, that we have to be able to meet the needs of our students with disabilities, 504s, English language learners. And so we in the MATSU are committed to making meaningful progress on goals and objectives on every IEP. You heard some testimony. I feel like they kind of did front loading for me for this presentation. We're having all of our IEP and 504 meetings on schedule. We haven't delayed them. We're pulling people together. We're having meaningful dialogue about planning for the future and assessing student need and setting, putting those IEPs and 504s in place. All of our special education case managers are reaching out to their families and they're coordinating a COVID-19 IEP amendment. The goal is to get most of all that work done by this Friday, which is unbelievable. It's about 12% of our student body. We're providing teletherapy for counseling and speech services as possible. And then when we can't provide the services due to the school closure that are in the IEP, we're making plans for compensatory education. And that could be available in the summer, it could be available next year, but we're going to make sure students get what the plan stated they needed. And we're going to check back in with the kids, reassess where they're at, and then develop those plans to make up for anything that was missed during the closure. Our English language learners, we have had great work from Becca Martin and Katie Ellsworth in federal programs. We had all of our parents who English is not their first language. They were called by an interpreter who speaks their home language to do the needs assessment. We had callers call families to see what level of technology, if they needed meals, if they had transportation, if they even understood what was being pushed out from the school in Russian, Ukrainian, Hmong, Thai, Lao, Korean, and Spanish. We're working with our ASL translators for our deaf and hard of hearing families to hear the broadcast messages, and our EL case managers are coordinating accommodations of all the lessons. All my cute little graphics didn't show up. So next step, each of the schools are working on documenting their remote learning plans. DEED has requested that we be able to provide a explanation of how we moved the curriculum forward and how we made sure that students were provided their education during this closure time so that we don't need to make up those days. And so all of our schools are documenting what they do as kind of a living document that's as we figure out what works. And our office is supporting them in those processes. We're having weekly principal meetings, and just to keep everyone on the same page and ensure equity and cohesion amongst all the different schools. That way families really can kind of have a consistent message if they have kids in multiple schools. We're working hard on first-class virtual graduations. We have some of our best and brightest on this task, and I am confident that it is going to be something we can be proud of. It will never make up for what the loss is of those seniors, and for that we are terribly disappointed as well. It is a highlight of the year, but this is kind of our place in history, and we know that there will be a silver lining to this. Some of these graduations, they're going to get a copy of it. They're going to have an ability to relive that moment in ways that maybe somebody who participated didn't. We are talking to our families. We know that we have a lot of grandparents who are working with kids who are doing blended learning. And we are developing our online training for families. We're working on ensuring that things are accessible to everybody and setting up helplines for them. I expect that that'll be rolling out sometime next week. We're looking at our summer learning opportunities. We're hoping maybe this will be lifted and there will be a way, either digitally or in person, that we can make up for some of this time lost. But if not, we're looking at how we can roll those things over. The federal government's been very supportive of pushing deadlines out and allowing us to think about things that are missed now that we can just delay them and do them later. And then SAMS is our summer academy for Mat-Su teachers, and that has also moved to be virtual. And last year we had close to 600 teachers doing professional development after school got out, and this year we're going to have that be a virtual process. That is my presentation, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for those who are online? Okay, hearing none, thank you very much, Ms. Spargo. Okay, moving on to the superintendent update and student advisory board report. From what I understand, Ms. Jensen is telephonic. Are you with us, Ms. Jensen?
I'm here.
Oh, fine. Do you have any report for the board tonight?
I do, actually. The Student Advisory Board has not met as a board since February, but our executive board has been working telephonically to find new ways to do elections and make sure that we're ready to move forward next year. We aren't quite sure how our elections are going to look right now, but we are trying to get that figured out. I think that we're doing like a Google form right now to see who's interested in running for positions. We have a teleconference tomorrow at 11, so hopefully we can get some more stuff figured out then. Tagging on to our administrative report and all of our public comment, we are very appreciative of everything that our teachers have been doing to help us get the help that we need right now since we don't have access to them in the classroom. This has been a massive undertaking for everyone in the district, and I think it's been going pretty well so far. Hopefully we can see that continued. I know that a lot of our students are really upset about the cancellation of events such as graduation, but I hope that everyone understands that this really is something that's necessary to keep us all safe and healthy right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Goyette?
Yes, good evening. Oh, I am just sorry. Oh, there it goes. For those that cannot see, I'm having operator errors with my clicker. Thank you very much. So I do want to do a brief update in light of the administrative report and really the primary focus on remote learning, and thank Amy Spargo for that. That was very comprehensive and really difficult to explain the tremendous lift that all of our staff have done over the last 2.5 weeks. We're so proud of them. So yesterday in the Board Connect, we gave the board an update on travel reimbursements from EF Tours, which is our primary tour company that we are using. And EF Tours has become more flexible as this pandemic has continued, and are now offering 3 options to our families where they can just transfer the entire cost of a tour to the exact same tour in a given year. And originally this was through 2021. I'm doing the update because this afternoon we received notice that they were extending these voucher dates through March of 2022. And so we are thrilled with that. We were concerned about that we may, unfortunately, pandemics can come in waves. And so if we were to see a recurrence of this next year, that our families would be in the same place. So these vouchers will be good for 2 years. So our families will be able to choose the exact same tour. They could transfer it to a different tour if they wanted, and EF Tours is willing to pay up to $300 if it's a more expensive tour, or they'll get a voucher if it's less expensive. And then if they want to cancel the tour, they have a couple of options. They can either, as an adult, they can go on a tour in the future at 17, 18, or 19 when they've graduated. They can go on a teacher-accompanied tour through EF Tours, or if they would, and they can transfer either of these options to anyone. Or if they just want to get as much money as they can back, they can do a cash-out option. There is a penalty of $1,000. So we were pleased with the progress that we're making there, and we are continuing to work with our other tour companies. We met, and I just want to congratulate Luke Fulp and his team. We met the preliminary budget deadline. So that has been transmitted to the borough, and I just want to thank him and his team for that. And really, as you see with everything that I'm going to be talking about, that we are keeping up with business as normal, in addition to all of the lift that we have going on with the school closure. We're still working on expanding our services. We would like our hotline to expand to nursing help and counseling help. We're doing trainings on that this week and hope to have that up by late week or early next week. The legislature did adjourn. They stopped working. It's not though. If things lift, they can go back. And I'm sorry, I don't have the technical term on my. But if they have time, they can go back and complete additional work, especially legislative bills that they maybe did not make progress on. And if not, that will just naturally end if they do not go back. And so for us right now, it's transmitted to the governor, and we'll be waiting back to hear on that. But that includes full funding of bond debt state obligation and additional $30 million one-time money that we did not build into our budget, as we did not this year. So that would be additional 3.9 in funds for next year. Finally, today is the first teacher posting, certified posting in the district, April 1st, according to the negotiated agreement. And approximately 100 positions were posted today. And so we want the board to have confidence that we are going to do everything that we can to secure employment with our teachers that wish to maybe be in a different position next year, but very quickly move through that, so then we can move on to out-of-district hires and make sure that we are in front of the line for hiring quality teachers. And so postings close next Wednesday, and then I am sure that everyone will get right away. We're going to be conducting all those through Zoom. And we have done some interviews already through Zoom, and they are working quite well. So our grab-and-go meal distribution, we've been in service for 13 days as of the end of the day yesterday. This did not include today's meal count. So we have served almost 35,000 meals. And I asked Assistant Superintendent Fulp to create this graph for us to demonstrate the blue line is our distribution site. The gray line is our home delivery, and the orange line is bus delivery. So you can see how quickly we pushed out our distribution sites and have maintained that. And then as we got home delivery and bus deliveries going, those were additional students that we were able to provide meals to. So I cannot thank their team enough. Chris Johnson, I would be remiss, Luke Fulp would remind me after that I had not given him and his team direct credit because they've just done an amazing job. And so I certainly want to give a shout out to them. So finally, I just want to remind folks that we're keeping our website updated daily. And so to please be sure and check there for all the latest information. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goyette. Moving on to item 6, the consent agenda. Minutes for March 18th, 2020, minutes for March 25, 2020, Midnight Sun FY21 calendar, and Berzovia fiscal 21 calendar. Do I have a motion and a second?
I move the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes of March 18th, 2020, minutes of March 25, 2020, Midnight Sun fiscal year 21 calendar, and Beryozova fiscal year 21 calendar.
Is there a second?
Someone online. Someone online needs to second this so we can move on, please.
Member Taylor seconds it.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, we will be moving on to item 7. Action items. Item A, MOA for first student contract. Do we have a motion and a second?
I move action item A, MOA for first student contract.
Member Trimmer second.
Okay, do we have an admin report?
Yes, it's for the next 4 items, Assistant Superintendent Fulp will be giving them.
Thank you, Dr. Goyette, President Berge, members of the school board. We presented this admin report at last meeting. However, we did have some updates that we presented or prepared for the board and built into the board packet and uploaded that yesterday. So I just briefly want to walk through those changes, and they really address the primary concerns that the board spoke of last time. I worked with the board's attorney, Mr. Salt Friedman, to come up with these new provisions, and we're hoping that they address the needs or concerns that the board had last time with regards to making sure the payment went to our local bus drivers and monitors. So under requirement number 1, and this will be consistent for all 3 MOAs for first student, Bunker and Bunker, and Glacier View transportation, those are action items A, B, and C. For the first requirement of the MOA, we stated the additional language that we built into the contracts is in bold text and underlined. It says that the additional payment is for the purpose of paying active bus drivers and monitors as of March 6, 2020. The reason why we used that date is that was the last day of service before spring break. So using that language, we clearly identify what the intent is behind this additional payment. Under item number 2, we list the number of bus drivers and monitors that were working under the contract for all 3 bus contractors. For first student, it's 207 bus drivers and monitors and attendants. For Bunker and Bunker, it's 24. And for Glacier View Transportation, it's 6. And so finally, under number 3, the requirement, we added that The bus contractor acknowledges that by entering into this MOA, it is agreeing to provide the names and payroll records supporting each invoice on a monthly basis. The additional payment, and it states the amount for each contractor, shall be reduced by the percentage of the total number of active employees invoice divided by whatever number is set forth in number 2 above. So for first student, that's 207. So I believe it was Member Taylor that expressed some concerns about, as we begin these payments to contractors, what happens if we have a number of layoffs or bus drivers no longer work for the contractor and they're electing unemployment benefits. We will be able to track through the payroll records, we will be able to track how many bus drivers and monitors and attendants are paid that month by that contractor. And if we have a reduced number, overall number of bus drivers, monitors, and attendants that are being paid by the bus contractor, we will reduce the amount of the additional payment by a commensurate percentage. So that ensures that there's no need for a credit later. We are just going to reduce it from the amount that we pay. And that I believe helps the board have some assurance that this extra payment is making it to the drivers and attendants that we wish to retain under service of these contracts. I'm available for questions if the board has questions on these MOAs, but that's the update that we have tonight.
This is Mr. Larson. I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
When the state would give us additional monies for different projects, the borough would take an administrative fee out of it of about 10%. Is there an administrative fee on this MOA?
Through the chair, Member Larson, we believe that a margin or overhead was built into the original rate of $326. So for first student, they had that penalty payment for any days under 170. They were going to charge the district $326 per bus per day. And we believe that that rate included some profit margin for first student. It's likely that this rate as well includes some aspect of a margin for their company, but they've given us the assurance that with this payment, while they haven't provided a complete breakdown of their cost structure and where the funds are going, they've given us the assurance that and guarantee that they can pay their entire workforce for a minimum of 4 hours each day.
But we don't know what the margin is.
No, we do not.
Is there any possibility of finding out what that margin is and being able to let the board know if that margin is high or just standard within the within the bus companies or in the actual business?
We could make that request of all three contractors. When we let me try to answer that another way too, if I could. When the contractors originally provide their proposal, so the proposal we received for the daily rate in 2016, while we entered into negotiations to adjust that rate incrementally, the original rate sheet that they provided us, the margin that they provided us at the time was $30 for each day of each bus route. So they provided us a margin of $30.03, which is just under 6%, 5.7%. It's likely that there's there's about, if that's the cost structure that they're currently operating under, year to year, their expenses change just like they change for us in the school district. But it's likely that margin such as 6 to 7 to 8% is still they're still benefiting from that.
That was our negotiated original negotiated item on our contract was 6%, but it's still unknown what this new margin will be, which is a little bit bothersome because, but maybe not. I don't know. It's just an unknown, I guess, more than anything. And I'd prefer knowing what that margin is. If it's the same margin within the business structure like everybody else has, I don't think there'd be any difficulties. But it would be nice to know that if we are paying this additional, I don't know, what is it, 1.4 million out there, that their margin didn't double or increase without our knowledge.
Is there any further questions for those who are online?
President Berge, this is Ryan Ponder.
Go ahead, Mr. Ponder.
I just wanted to confirm that nothing with the recently passed stimulus package is going to affect those that this is supposed to be helping, just to ensure that, they'll still be able to claim if they're not working, or how will any payments received by these individuals, the bus drivers and monitors, be affecting their eligibility for the stimulus package?
Yes, Member Ponder, you specifically referencing unemployment benefits, the additional unemployment benefits?
Federal ones, yes.
Okay. Through the chair, we were able to speak with First Student yesterday. First Student's been in contact with the Teamsters Union regarding these MOAs, and while they don't have all of the details around federal unemployment benefits that will be available to their drivers, they believe that this payment is still going to be helpful for their workforce. And there was some discussion that as a result of the pay being reduced from 8 hours to 4 hours, that their employees would still be eligible for unemployment benefits based on prior year earnings. So there's a lot of factors that go into unemployment eligibility for each bus driver, or each employee, but it was at least what they expressed to us was that there was a way in which bus drivers and attendants and monitors would still be eligible for benefits because their pay was reduced from their regular wages.
Thank you. And I mean, this is going towards the 207 active bus drivers, but if there was, for some reason, people weren't taking this because we found that it did affect that stimulus package and those that were seeking after or to obtain benefits of it. I know that in Section 3 here, as you indicated, it would be the additional payments would be reduced by the percentage of the total number of active employees. So if people started stepping back and didn't want it for whatever reason, then it's just simply that it wouldn't be paid. Is that accurate?
That's correct, and that's the reason for the provision.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any further questions from the board?
Yeah, I'd like a further question if I could.
Go, Mr. Larson.
So as it stands, the bus drivers would get paid 4 hours out of an 8-hour day. And if these MOAs go through, how many hours would they pick up on their daily rate? Is that 6 hours? Is that additional 2 hours? Is that what I'm reading?
I'm sorry, we don't understand the question, Member Larson.
Okay. If this MOA didn't go through, would the bus drivers get any pay whatsoever?
No.
So they are, the bus company is finding us 60% of what we our daily rate, correct? Because it was not 170 days. Is that correct?
It's 61.6% is the current contracted penalty for days under 170.
So what happens to that 61% money? Where does that go? Since it doesn't go to payroll.
what First Student has referenced with that payment is it covers their fixed costs. But one of the things that that penalty payment considers is potentially a shorter term duration. So days under 170, maybe 2 to 3 days. They did not, when we negotiated that contract, we were not envisioning a school closure that extended 47 days. So it is a little different in terms of the duration aspect, but what they've referred to us is, or communicated to us, is that the intent of that provision that they wanted built into the contract was to cover fixed costs for the contractor.
Yeah, fixed costs for 1 or 2 days, but 47 days, they are going to get 61% of the daily rate and not pay any of their employees. And now we are going to go ahead and pay their employees for them.
I want to clarify. I think Assistant Superintendent Fulp was attempting to answer your question. We can't say definitively if we had just paid the minimum penalty of 60% what the company would have done. I mean, this is not our company. This is not our employees. So that's not a question that we can answer with full certainty.
I realize that, but I was kind of led to believe that they would get at least 4 hours of pay from their company because their company is picking up 61%. And that we would add to that 4 hours possibly so they could get an additional couple hours, 6 hours or so to increase their daily rate. But what I understand now is the 47 days of 61% are set aside and that we will be paying the 4 hours a day pay, and that the bus company then will take that, I assume, chunk of money and do whatever they want to with it. And that's my assumption. And maybe I'm wrong there, but that's what it appears to me as being. We're paying the wages, and 61% is going elsewhere, where 85% of our budget is personnel, and I would assume that would be pretty much any private business. The majority of their cost is personnel and some maintenance, of course, with buses, but their overhead can't be 61%. I'm just wondering how much of that is a profit margin, and we're paying the payroll.
I would prefer that we not speculate on that.
Well, as of right now, since we can't speculate on that, and there's so much unknown, I can't possibly vote in favor of this until I get that information.
That's it. I'd like to make a comment. Years ago, the school district owned the buses and did all the bus stuff. We chose to outsource it, and we have no control over what they do. And we had no control over the contract, really, when it came down to it. I mean, I could sit here and go, we shouldn't have taken the contract years and years ago because there wasn't any competition. We don't have any control over that. What we've got is we've got community. And we have these people in our community that need some kind of taken care of. And we can, hope that the bus company would do that. But we don't have access to go in and say, hey, you're not being a good community member. We can't do that. We do not know what all their costs are for their equipment. We do know that their buses are extremely expensive. We do know that their liability is high. We have chosen not to be a part of that, but we have chosen to help the community in this way. And I would like for you to rethink about whether you can vote for it or not, because of it being the crisis that we're in. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yes, I have a comment. This is Member Hart.
Go ahead, Mr. Hart.
I agree with Member Larson. It's not the place of the school board to take care of employee relations for a private firm. That is something that needs to be between the Teamsters and the First Student and the bus companies. And again, like Member Larson said, money is fungible. What you give them, may pay their payroll, but that frees up money elsewhere in their budget. Their obligation under the contract is to provide X number of buses. How they do that is not our issue. Like Member Welton said, we washed our hands of buses. This is unfortunate circumstance for everybody, not just the bus drivers, but also the people who drive delivery vans, for commodities, like vegetables and other things that may be delivered to the schools. So I don't see that this is the responsibility or the role of the school district to be disaster relief for people, no matter how valuable they may be. It's just not our role, and I don't think this is a proper use of school board funds, of school district funds. There are other projects that we need to spend money on, and we know that there are aid packages coming down the line, not just for the bus drivers, but for everybody that's been hurt by this. But yeah, this, like Member Larson said, this is a slippery slope, and it's not the right way to spend the tax money we've been given.
Member Berge, or President Berge.
Yes, Mr. Ponder.
I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly, because I feel like it's kind of maybe not. Let me just repeat what I understand. In the contract, there's a clause that states that we have to pay the difference of if they don't meet 170 days, right? So if we're 45 days short, then we're going to pay the daily rate for 45 days. Is that accurate?
Through the chair, Member Ponder, we will. The contract terms specify in the First Student contract. These contract terms do not exist in the Bunker and Glacier View contract. The proposals that were before the board for all three are meant for consistency's sake. But the contract specifies that if we are under 170 days, we are required to pay 61.6% of the daily rate, which is $326.
61?
61.
Point what?
0.6.
And so we're required, so where I'm going with that is we have a contractual obligation to pay 61-point-odd%, right? No matter what.
We are going to move forward and pay that. That's part of the contract that the board agreed to and approved in 2016. So we will be paying that amount regardless.
Okay. And so what's been put into the contract at the extra 20%, right, has been specifically designated for the bus drivers and monitors. I mean, that's it. From last week to this week, that's what Saul worked on to make sure, hey, these funds that we're putting forth are going to go to the bus drivers and monitors.
That's correct.
Right. And so we already have the contractual obligation to pay the $300+ and as a result, we're just trying to say, hey, as just like many of the other businesses throughout the community have done, we want to ensure that economy doesn't tank, and we have budgeted 100% of the 170 days. That's accurate? I mean,
that's correct as well. We've budgeted for a payment of $530 per day per bus.
Okay. And has during thank you. That answers kind of those things. Now I do want to kind of shift to something else. Did Saul review the force majeure clause of the contract?
I'm sorry, can you restate that?
Did Saul all review the force majeure clause within the contract. That is basically where you have a clause that says, for unforeseen reasons, the contract may not be able to be performed.
Yes, he did, and Mr. Friedman is available if there's specific questions around that. We would just need to do a brief at ease and get him on the line.
Okay, I mean, because under the force majeure clause, which I really appreciate all the contracts being placed online. I mean, I'm looking at 15.2, and it talks about governmental acts, and so governmental acts being something that would wholly excuse the performance under the contract. So, I mean, if there's some doubts and questions on where the money's going to go, I think that we would probably hold the upper hand on ensuring that if we want all the money to go to the bus drivers and monitors, that under 15.2, the force majeure, we can exercise that the whole contract be excused, but then turn around and say, hey, we do want to give X percent to the bus driver and monitors. And specifically, I'm looking at 15.2.1.1C, Government Act. But I leave that to Saul to determine whether that force majeure would apply.
That really is for the board to decide.
Whether or not we want to excuse ourselves of the contract in whole, or at least this provision.
That'd be my recommendation if the board wants to get more information on the force majeure provision, that we have Saul Friedman call in.
I mean, President Berge, I would be apt to go that direction. I don't want to see the opportunity to help the community members not be, exercised. But at the same time, if there's a concern that 60% of the 80% that we're going to be paying is going to be tied up in areas that isn't going directly to those folks, then, perhaps the force majeure clause could be explored, and we can, partially excuse ourselves from that one provision that we're kind of getting hung up on. I mean, that's what the contract clearly states to me, but I would have to, default and be curious to know what Saul would have to say on that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
We're going to do a 10-minute at ease and get Mr. Friedman on the line.
Jeff Taylor
has left. Saul Friedman.
Has joined.
Hello, this is Saul.
Saul, we're still on break. The board will be back momentarily.
Okay. Thanks, Luke. Hello, Luke, are you still there?
Yes, I am, and everyone in the room can hear.
Okay, I'm just holding then.
Okay. You may want to mute your line, Saul, until we reconvene.
Mr. Friedman, I hear you're with us.
I am, President Berge. Thank you.
Do we have all the other board members back with us? Mr. Ponder? Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Jeff Taylor.
Has joined.
Hello, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Ponder, are you back with us?
Yeah, here.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Freeman. We're all present.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ponder, your question was, had I reviewed the force majeure provisions of the contract?
Yes, it's my understanding that there is the provision that we have to pay a daily rate due to the fact that we're under the 170-day threshold and due to, again, the contract, right? And so I'm looking at it from, well, do we really have to pay that based off the force majeure under, government acts that would possibly partially excuse us from that provision? Right.
And I have reviewed that, and you're correct that Section 15.2.1.1C is government acts other than an act of the district, and other calamity of nature is the other provision. But what happened here when I was first asked with Luke to come up with an agreement that would continue payment to the bus drivers and monitors who would no longer be working on their buses during the closure, we moved ahead in an effort to determine how much to pay per student to accomplish that goal. And the way we had approached it was not to terminate the contract in total, but rather it was to look at the daily rate that the district was going to pay for a student for the time when the buses wouldn't be running, and that was whatever that number is, the $326. And built into that, when we negotiated that, was their fixed cost, which Mr. Folk talked about, which was the cost of the bus barns, the mechanics, other employees, things of that nature. But when we moved into the next phase of ensuring that the drivers were paid, that's when we discussed, and I discussed with President Berge, the fact that the federal stimulus bill had come through and was just passed, and that bill requires, as a condition of the state of Alaska receiving that $1.2 billion, which I believe part of it goes under the Education Stabilization Fund, which is in the HR 748, the stimulus bill. It says, Section 18006, that the state that receives funds under that Education Stabilization Fund shall, to the greatest extent practicable, continue to pay its employees and contractors during the period of any disruption or closures related to the coronavirus, COVID-19. So we moved ahead. I mean, that's what we've been waiting for, to understand what the federal government was going to require. And we've been in touch with the trade group in the limited time we've had, the trade group for the national bus contractors, transportations, got information from their lobbying organizations that part of the term contractor that's in that Section 18006 includes pupil transportation contractor, that there's no, and they believe that, that was discussed with the senators and Senator Murkowski in their discussions lobbying with her, and the law does not put any exclusions to the term contractor. So we are currently operating under the premise that the federal law requires the district to continue to pay its contractors during the period of any disruptions or closures. And so the question does come down to, what does that mean, continue to pay? And our initial belief, Mr. Ponder, and you raise a point, is that we would pay them as required under the contract, which enables them to maintain their business in existence because they do have fixed costs, but then we would increase that amount for the sole purpose of paying employee salaries. because the reason that $326 was negotiated was the difference between that and the $530 per day per route was that First Student would not be paying payroll for drivers and monitors, not be paying workers' compensation insurance for those folks, not be paying all of the add-ons that go into wages. So when Mr. Pope and I continued our negotiations, we were following what we believed was the federal course of conduct, which is pay these bus drivers, but you pay them by paying the contractor. I think you're right that we could take the position that 15.2 allows us to cancel the contract and to get out of the contract because of Government Act, and therefore the contract is excused from performance and we're excused from paying them. But the bill, the stimulus bill, H.R. 748, puts a condition on that government action, which is that it wants the school districts, as a condition of receiving money, to continue paying employees and its contractors. So that's why we drafted this MOA, all of the three MOAs, to pay an additional amount over and above the fixed cost, which had previously been agreed to be paid without wages, to pay that additional amount, which would then go only to the wages of the employees. That's how we got to where we are, Mr. Bonda.
Thank you. And just to be very clear, I'm just simply exploring, asking the questions to have a full understanding and be informed on the decision we're making, not suggesting that the whole contract be canceled by any stretch. I just see that there are provisions that can be partially excused. So if there was, some issue with 100, if originally this was created for 170 days with the understanding that, if we didn't meet that 170-day threshold at 2, 4, 10 days, then we would do this, rate. So therefore, now we're at 45 days. Nobody ever, foresaw that. Hence, force majeure comes in, right? This was unforeseeable that there would be 45 days. Now, with everything that you indicated, so I'm curious to know if what you're saying is under some of the stimulus packages and under some of the bills that have been passed, that educators are supposed to keep their contracts in place, and to some extent. But if that's the case, then why would we be dropping the daily rate down to a penalty clause and not simply keeping it at 100%?
Because the existing contract that we're following only requires us to pay that rate. I mean, our position, and I've discussed this with Luke, is we don't want to be under an obligation. We don't want to be under an obligation to pay $530, which includes some costs that they're not even going to be incurring, which would be fuel and other costs which are solely based upon running the buses, more other than wages. So we took the position that if we're obligated to continue the contract, we follow the actual wording of the contract, which says if you're not running the buses, you pay them. If they're not running the buses, you pay them the $336 or whatever that number is. I'm sorry. And so our position is we could legally pay them that $336, but it's not doing what was intended by, I believe, stimulus bill as well as the board, which was to get additional money into the hands of those people who would otherwise not be paid, the bus drivers and the monitors. That's,
right, but
that's why.
in that same vein of thought, if we're following the contract and therefore we would pay the penalty clause, if we're truly following the contract and we have a calamity of nature or a government act, we would be implementing and exercising the force majeure.
Right, and then we would not be continuing their contract, which is the condition that the government is saying the shutdown by the force majeure does not, by a government act, does not apply if, to the extent that you can continue the contract as practicable. And of course, since we have budgeted that money and the state is not taking that money back, in my view, we have the means to continue the contract.
But only exercising that as the 300 plus as opposed to the 500 plus.
Right, and that amount would not pay any money to the drivers or the monitors. And that's why we're here, because this is the way in which to make First Student pay that money to those contractors, as opposed to just saying we're giving you $336 per day.
Right, but that amount is only the difference between the 300 and the 61% and the 80+%. That 20% is what's going to the contractors.
Right, and there's no money going. There's no money going to the contractor for any of the costs which would not have been assumed if we only paid that $336. In other words, other than the wages, we're not paying for fuel, we're not paying for oil. We're not paying for those things, those consumables that are no longer going to be paid because the buses are not running. Now,
gotcha.
You can get into arguments about tire wear and tear and things like that, but I mean, they're still paying for insurances and bonds and the bus bond and whatever cost they have to buy the buses. Yes.
Okay, so it is not the difference between the two. Instead of it's $437 that in its entirety is going to pay for the bus drivers and monitors.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And with that in mind, I mean, and I haven't had the opportunity to scroll through the 880 some odd pages of everything that's going on, but with the PPP, I mean, that's part of the stimulus package that allows companies just like First Student, in my understanding, to go to the banks, get a loan to ensure that they can keep functioning as a business, and everything is forgiven that that goes to payroll. Are you familiar with that at all? I mean, does that sound accurate?
Well, I mean, there's provisions where money could be available, yes, to businesses for those purposes, whether it's low interest loans or maybe there's even grants that could be, but that's an application process that's down the road. What we've ensured is that whatever money is being paid for the wages by the district First Student is going to be pay that to the drivers and monitors, and we will be making sure, just Luke and I have discussed this already, that any effort by First Student to receive more money from the government cannot be based upon their need for driver wages that have already been paid through the district's contract. We can't monitor what First Student wants to do for the rest of its business and what's happening when it can't get, buses for, replacement buses or, whatever. We can't, we have no control over that, but we do have control over the fact that it did not receive any funding for the monies that the district has paid.
And so with that, and I'm kind of getting a little bit of, based off the conversation that occurred earlier, it was we don't have control over what they do with money and how they do that. My impression was the $326 was going to be kept by First Student, and the $111.22 was then allocated to ensure that it goes to the bus drivers and monitors. But with what I'm hearing you say under number one of the therefores, it states that $437 for the purpose of paying active bus drivers and monitors as of March 6th. But then under provision 3 of that resolution, it's stating that there is a differentiation between the 326 and the 437, which is $111, and that makes me think that it's only the $111 that's going to the bus drivers and monitors.
Yes, that's right. Because the 337, when it was negotiated, it excluded wages because those buses weren't being operated. So the days under 170, the buses that were excused, the buses would not be operating. They'd still have buses, they'd still have a bus barn, they'd still have management, they'd still have mechanics, but they wouldn't be paying wages to the drivers or the monitors because the buses would not be operating.
And while I understand that, a question is what would preclude first students from going and making filings saying, hey, we're a busing company and we can't, we're not in business because schools have been shut down, and in recouping all that money through the federal package, but then at the same time, we're still paying them the $326 that's going to them. And while I understand it's not my place to how they operate their business, what is my place in that fiscal responsibility and fiduciary duty to ensure that the money is not being double dipped and we're not making first students richer than what they would have been.
Well,
had we not exercised the force majeure.
Right, if we exercise the force majeure, I think we put at risk the obtaining any monies from under the stimulus bill, because we are not continuing the contract. That's the dilemma that we have, and everything has been happening so quickly that there's questions that we have not had time to explore the kind of detail that we need to, because the bill just came through over the weekend, and we've been reviewing it and analyzing it. But the whole purpose of this is to make sure people get paid during this period of time when they're not otherwise getting paid. We've worked with First Student for 6 years. We're looking at maybe a 10-year new contract for a bus company. We're not assuming, and you're right. I don't disagree with you that due diligence, but we're not assuming that they are going to commit criminal fraud by seeking funds that, alleging that they needed funds for the purposes that our district's payments are going to. And to the extent we can monitor that, and we know that, and we have the contract and the invoices to send to the appropriate people, whether it's the Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General's office, or our congressional delegation, we will do that. But we have not gone into our thinking here on the basis that First Student or Bunker or Glacier View are going to intentionally commit a fraud. That wasn't in our thinking.
Right. And I think you bring up a great point with Glacier View and Bunker, where they don't have, as I understand it, they don't have a penalty clause, right? So if we're going to follow the contract, are we paying them, Bunker and Glacier View, 100% of the contract, since we don't have a default penalty clause to go to?
Yes, and we are, but their routes are a lower number of hours, so we're requiring them to pay. And Mr. Fulp, you may need to jump in here. I don't have that specific number, but we're requiring them to pay more of the bus and monitors than what more of the total salaries for the monitors and bus drivers than what first student is being required to pay.
Right. I mean, Bunker's daily rate $627, whereas the resolution that we're going to pass is going to say, hey, we'll pay you $517. So, right. I mean, we're getting away from what's contracted, and we don't have anything in the contract to lean up against. But I think there's some consistency issues there. If I understand we're being consistent, but we're not consistently applying the contract, right? And so
right. But what we're doing with Bunker, and you're right. I mean, Bunker still is not going to have the fixed costs because it's not running the buses, and we have negotiated a reduction with Bunker and with Glacier View because of that. I don't think anybody can fault us for not paying the contractual rate when the contractual rate was premised on the buses running the entire time. We made it a point of negotiating a lower rate because the buses would not be running, and therefore there would be certain costs that weren't going to be assumed by Bunker or Glacier View, and we didn't want that to be a windfall to them. So sure. To that extent, we were consistent. We're paying a lesser amount in order to make sure that there's no windfall to the contractors, but they're paying the drivers. That's just what we try to accomplish, Mr. Bonda.
And okay, no, that understood. With all of this, is there a means for, and you kind of hit on this, just trying to circle back, is there a means for us to get recompensated? Is that what you had mentioned, that we, the school district, will get recompensated for the contracts that we continue to pay on?
No, I didn't mean to say that. I'm saying we would make sure that First Student and Bunker could not seek stimulus funds to double dip. But from the district's perspective, we've been told by the Department of Education that you have the whole year's worth of student transportation monies from the state. They're not seeking to take back any proportion of it because schools are shut down from bus transportation. And so we're just utilizing the money that was, well, we're using less money than what was ultimately originally budgeted for.
And I guess since we don't have anywhere else that money can be utilized, and maybe it can't be, like roofs on schools or anything like that, then we might well be doing what the federal government appears to already be doing, and that is helping these folks.
Well, no, because the district's general fund is still needed to subsidize pupil transportation. The monies provided by the state are not enough. So the district's general fund, and I'll give you approximate monies here, I believe subsidizes the school bus contract by $2 million. And by reducing these three contracts, I believe we're saving the district $750,000 out of that $2 million. That's Luke can give you the more specific. Mr. Fope can give you the more specific numbers. But so we're actually having money maintained in the general fund that can be used for other purposes as a result of this.
And that money can be used for other purposes? That's
yes,
savings?
That money from the general fund is money that the board appropriates. And you appropriated it in order to, over and above what the state provided, in order to enter into a school bus contract that is more than what the state provides. But to the extent that you don't need to appropriate as much money as you had budgeted, that money is now back in the general fund for the board to use however it deems fit.
Right. And effectively, which could be done if a force majeure clause was exercised, it would be done at 100% of that contract, and all of those individuals would still be cared for based off of what has been appropriated at the $2 to $6 trillion by the federal government. Everybody is still made as whole.
Whatever amount, what happens with this money, this educational stabilization fund, the state of Alaska gets a certain amount of money out of the fund, out of the total fund, and then the state of Alaska apportions that out to the individual districts. How much it's going to ultimately be to the individual districts, I cannot tell you.
Right, and I'm referring to the companies, though. Companies being able to be taken care of through the stimulus package that they can file for. But okay, I definitely feel like you've provided a wealth of information so as to be able to make a more informed decision. But I do feel like there's a lot that's unknown based off the fact that, as you stated, this came out days ago, and trying to figure out how it all is laid out.
This is Member Trimmer. I've got a couple of comments.
Go ahead, Mr. Trimmer.
So I agree with Member Ponder that there's a lot to be figured out with this the federal stimulus package, because as a small business owner, my understanding is that only $10,000 of a loan of up to $500,000 would be grant money. So, and I could be wrong too, because like I say, it's still new and everybody's still trying to figure it out. But my understanding, and either Mr. Fulp or Mr. Friedman can verify, my understanding is that the state gave us the required appropriation for our pupil transportation. We are keeping that. We would have had to subsidize that to pay the full amount. However, our subsidized amount that we would have had to pay above and beyond what the state gave us, we're not going to have to use for this if we approve 100%. Is that correct?
When you say if we approve 100%, I'm not sure. I don't understand that. Under the initial contract, if you paid 100% of the contract, you would be subsidizing approximately $2 million of general fund monies. Under the 3 MOAs, the reduced amount for the rest of the year would save, of that $2 million, would decrease that to 1.25. Mr. Fulp, you know those numbers better than I, but it's...
Yeah, if I could interject here. If these MOAs were approved and put into place, we would have Mr. Friedman's correct in that the general fund is currently supported by a $2 million transfer. If the board were to stick with just its current contractual obligations of paying a daily rate for days under 170 to first student only, because that is the only contractor with that provision of $326, the overall savings would be $1.9 million. So that would be close to the full amount that is transferred. However, if these MOAs were approved by the board and the payment was made, then the transfer, the amount saved against the budget would be $732,000.
And what was the annual appropriation from the state for pupil transportation for this year?
About $16 million.
I have a couple of questions if you're done, Kelsey. If not, I'll wait.
I'm done.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
Okay. So the 61.8%, which was my original question, is the overhead cost for bus maintenance, administrative costs, and everything. for the bus company. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, you call it overhead. I guess
Well, overhead to be able to do everything a bus company does before they pay the wages.
Yes.
Is 61%, 61.8%.
Yes.
Except they can pay their maintenance people, which they have. They're working on buses. Their administrative people, and the people in their office, such as accounting and payroll. We're strictly talking at 61.8% from that time forward pays your bus people and your aides. Is that what I'm hearing?
The 61% excludes payment of the bus drivers and the monitors.
So
and the fixed costs as well of fuel and what have you.
Yeah, the fixed cost of fuel that they're saving is in that 61%. They'll save a little bit of money because their buses are not on the road for these 47
right, and that was the point of trying to negotiate down from the 530, what we did 6 years ago, which was was to try to figure out at that time, based on the information we had, what was a fair amount to pay them for the days the buses weren't running below 170.
Mr. Fold, okay, go ahead.
No, that's all.
Mr. Fold indicated that there is a cost, administrative cost of 6, 7, or 8% for payroll that will become out of this money, even though the 61.8% includes that. Is there a condition proceeding on this where there is no additional cost, that this money is just purely payroll because they are paying their payroll people and they're paying their administrative costs? Are we going to have to add a 6% off this money additional?
No. The driver's salaries and the monitor's salaries, I mean, I don't know how they do their business, but on top of those, as part of the cost of a business paying a salary, you have employer taxes and you have other benefits, that you may be paying as a percentage of the wages. Those are going to be paid.
Those are normally come out of the wages. I'm not debating that. That, everything, Social Security, all that money that normally comes out is going to come out. What I'm saying, is there any additional administrative cost that's going to come out of this money, or is this money condition proceeding totally just strictly money to pay salary, not to pay, say,
yeah.
The example I gave is when the borough gets grant money that goes through them to us, they usually take an administrative cost out of it. Will there be an administrative cost taken out of the money if we vote on this in an affirmative?
No. There's certainly no administrative cost taken by the state out of the money, nor the borough. And when we negotiated this lower amount for the days the buses were running, the costs that remained in were management costs, supplies, insurance, bonding, travel expenses, training, audit, interest and overhead, and then profit, which I think Luke said the profit portion was $30 out of the 500, whatever the total amount was. I think you said it was 6% or something like that. So no, there is the contemplation is that there is no. The money goes to wages. That's what we've agreed to, and we know how much it is, and we know how much what they're going to show us. 207 payroll sheet slips each month when they invoice for that money. Now, if
So
they
when
invoice, I was just going to say, Ole, if I may, Mr. Larson, if they invoice more than that, we're not paying that. If they invoice less than that because they don't have as many drivers and monitors, we're going to pay a lower amount. But that's the amount. It's a fixed amount that we're paying, and it has to go to the wages, and they have to invoice us for that with backup.
So if they invoice, say, $1,000 in wages, that's the $1,000 we allocated would go strictly to wages and nothing else. And they could take and deduct everything that is deducted out of a paycheck, of course.
Yes. That's what we tried to say in the MOA, that's where it has to go.
And President Berge?
There is one last thing. There is what you call technically a condition proceeding in the MOA saying that strictly that money goes strictly for that purpose and nothing else. Correct?
Yes, I don't have that. I could pull that up, but yeah, I think that was Luke. You have that in front of you. Is it paragraph 3?
Number 1, it says that the additional payment is for the purpose of paying active bus drivers and monitors as of March 6, 2020.
And can President Berge, may I real quick just clarify?
Go right ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Ponder.
When we keep saying this money or that amount, we're talking, just for clarity, we're talking the $111, right? Not $437.
That's correct.
$111 is going to go to payroll.
Right, the amount above the 336.
Thank you. That's all. Just
the amount above 326, Mr. Friedman.
326.
I do appreciate this information that we've been receiving now. It sure helps and maintains us to be able to make an informative vote. And that's where I was really confused initially when this came forward. I have no other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson.
President Berge, this is Member Taylor.
Yes, Mr. Taylor.
I just want to, I've been a very devout student this last little bit of SBA loans and things like that. And from what I am gathering with what's going on with the federal government and this one is that they're telling us, since we've received money from them, we need to pay our contractors. If we don't, then we risk losing money next year or something like that. Is that correct?
I don't know what that's correct in terms of the money going to the school districts. They're saying the same thing. If you want this money, you have to do this.
So we need to pay our contractors according to our contract and live up to that. But I want to make sure that we are taking care of the drivers and monitors. I think they fall outside of that clause as employees of First Student. With the new stimulus stuff, on unemployment, they can all earn $600 right now per week on top of whatever they qualify for on state unemployment. If we pay them, if we do this, we say, okay, we're going to be nice stewards of our community and give you some money that will then be deducted out of their unemployment, which could be upwards to $1,000 a week, depending on their income throughout the year. And so they're really, they're getting a piece of it from us, and then the rest of it's being made up in unemployment insurance. I don't know that we're really, are we really doing them the favor, or are we just helping the federal government and unemployment out by using money from the school district instead of unemployment insurance?
Well, if I may, we've tried to analyze that aspect of this just the way you have, and also to try to understand how the Teamsters are looking at this, because that's the union that represents these folks. What we understand now, and we've I think Luke may have spoken to someone in the department, but Mr. Fulp may have. I can't remember all the conversations he and I have had, but it's our understanding that there's a benefit to these employees taking the wages, because by taking wages, they're increasing their annual income, which then increases the amount of unemployment insurance that they will receive.
And that's my understanding that that's true.
Right. And we're not in a position for each, we don't know what other jobs these drivers and monitors have last summer or over the holidays, but I guess that's one of the reasons why that if that 207 number goes down, we're going to be reducing the amount of money the district pays because it's going to less people. And if those people, I think was mentioned earlier by somebody, if those people make a choice that they've analyzed what's better for them, which is to quit or be furloughed or asked to be furloughed, and then they'll go for unemployment, they're making that individual choice is what's best for them. We can't make that for them. We can only make sure that if they make a choice that says, I don't want this money, we don't pay that money.
Right. Okay. And I appreciate that being in that MOA. What First Student does, it sounds like they'll be limited as far as what they can apply for, whether it's a PPP loan or an IEDL loan. They're going to be limited because of the federal monies that are used to pay them through us.
Right.
So we're living up to our contract, and we're living up to what the federal government has told us to do, and whether the employee chooses to go on unemployment fully or to accept this payment and take it out of unemployment, that's up to them. I don't know. I think this has been thought through pretty good.
Thank you.
This is Member Trimmer. I've just got a couple of comments.
Yes, Mr. Trimmer.
First of all, the thing that keeps coming to mind with me when we talk about this, especially with unemployment insurance, is medical insurance, and that this would allow them to maintain that medical insurance, which at this time I think is very important. And my other comment in support of this, these action items, is that the state has given us that money specifically for pupil transportation, and they haven't chosen to try to take that back in any way. So I think it's our responsibility to use it for what it was given to us for by the state. And that's all I have.
President Berge?
Mr. Ponder?
I just want to throw out. I'm looking at this. If we keep by what the contract is, which is what I'm understanding, the Department of Education has directed, or at least not necessarily directed, but put out there, right? Advised. Would that be accurate?
Well, it's the stimulus bill that has said you have to, if in order to be eligible for the education portion of the stimulus monies, the school districts have to pay their employees and as well as paying school district contractors. That's what it says.
In addition to that, I'd like to just jump in because the question was posed for Deed as well. Heidi Teschner, the Director of Finance and Support Services for the Department of Education and Early Development, stated that the Deed is encouraging districts to continue paying their contractors.
And if I could jump in there, we are, regardless, we're paying our contractors 61.8%. We are paying them. What we're talking about is paying above what we are contractually obligated to, so that the bus drivers can get additional money or get paid. So we are paying our contractors what we are contractual due. Is that correct, Mr. Freeman?
Yes, we're paying them what is. I mean, we would pay them the amount, the $326, that is due for those days that the buses are not running. And you're right, then, and that means that none of that money is going to wages, and the I wish I could tell you, Mr. Larson, whether under the stimulus bill they would, they would say that we want you to pay the full 570 because then we know that wages will be paid. And
that's the unknown.
That's the unknown. But what we've guaranteed is that anything above the 326 must go to wages. Because if we had to pay the 570, there would be fixed costs in that aren't going to be required to be paid by first student because they won't have those fixed costs, but they'll have the full 530. So we've tried to come up with the methodology that gets the bus drivers money and that saves the district money from what the daily rate could be required. But we started with the premise that I was told earlier that we wanted to make sure the bus drivers got paid, and that's where we've ended up in a way that we think is the most protective of the district and protective of the drivers and monitors as we could do legally.
President Berge.
Who is this?
Sorry, this is Member Hart.
Yes, Mr. Hart.
Just to clarify, we are not promised any reimbursement for anything we do above the contractual obligation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I have not. We don't know. We don't know how this. We could apply to the state for the district's portion of that stabilization money. But some of the uses that stabilization money allow are arguably, they're broad enough catch-all that we could apply for additional monies for the bus contract.
But we don't have any assurance that if we applied to a state, which right now is going broke, if we applied to the state that we would actually get that money instead of Deed getting it or them giving it to another district. We have no idea, correct?
Well, we know what would be allocated to the district by law, of what percentage, there's a percentage of the total that would be allocated to the district, but the district still has to apply for that money and have it approved as within the requirements of the education stabilization portion of this. But whether or not they would want to reimburse the district for paying less than what the bus contract actually requires, I don't know that. I can't answer.
Okay. Mr. Hart. No, that's good. That's good. And then reading through the MOA, I'm not seeing anything that talks about, to Member Trimmer's point, anything that talks at all about them maintaining health benefits or anything of the sort. So I just wanted to make that point as well, that if we paid this extra money, it would be going to salaries. We would not be guaranteed reimbursement on this, and it's not necessarily giving them health insurance or anything of that nature. We don't know what it's going to do after that. We're go ahead.
Oh, Ms. Hart, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. They would remain as employees, so they would be covered by the contract that they have, the Teamster contract that protects them and provides benefits. I'm assuming that, and I haven't read that contract. I'm assuming I know there's paid leaves in that contract. There's other provisions, and I believe there's medical in that. But that's between the Teamsters and First Student as to what other benefits are provided to the Teamster employees. The employees of First Student who are members of the Teamster.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's between the company and the Teamsters Union. Okay, then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, guys, but Mr. Freeman, would you stay on the line? I'm going to interrupt you for a bit. We're going to move on to some public comment here. We have a few folks waiting.
Okay, thank you.
We'll come back. So, At this time, Ms. Spinelli, would you still wish to speak? Please come forward and state your name for the record, please.
My name is Christine Spinelli. I work for First Student, but I do not represent them as a company. I am here today with a slightly unexpected viewpoint. I would like to start by saying thank you to all of you. During this time, a world of trouble lays at your hands to resolve, and that has got to be a huge burden to bear, and I thank you for that. With all the unknown to this federal stimulus package, I can only imagine the research you have ahead of you. I want you to know that whatever decision you make today will upset someone. Our bus barn is full of various circumstances, and there is no way to ensure everyone gets the best deal. A few examples. A new hire without a year worked at all gets nothing on unemployment, but benefits greatly with a full payout on the contract. A person who hasn't worked many hours may or may not benefit with a contract payout or even a partial increase. A person like me, I receive the full weekly benefit amount on unemployment. So no increase plus the dependent increase for Alaska and the eventual $600 weekly amount actually increases my monthly take home by at least $600 a month. So as you can see, it's not perfect. There is no way to make it perfect. I'm here to urge you to make a decision today. I know the pressure, and I'm sorry to place this pressure on you. However, at this time, all of us are in a point of limbo. First Student has agreed to pay the 4 hours a day, I believe, at their expense as you make your decision. I do not begin to try to say I understand the workings of this contract, but a company does have to do what's necessary to stay open. So I do not know how long they will continue this without the bump in the contract. What I do know, the borough has budgeted the amounts to the bus companies. I also know no one is asking you to go above that budget. For simplicity, I'll use fake numbers. 500 is a full contract, 300 is school canceled days, 200 difference is still in the budget. No one is asking for even $1 more than the full contract amount, minus the gas. I also know Deeds has provided their portion to that contract. What I don't know is if the full payout is not paid, what happens to that budget money? As a citizen of the borough, I ask and urge you to ensure if you use the federal stimulus, please ensure we gain no debt. These times are curious, and more debt is not likely to benefit the borough. As an employee of a contract company, I urge you to make a decision today. However that may look, we as employees are without say-so. We are in limbo. Give us the power to make financial decisions for our families by making a decision today. Even though a full contract payout will bring overall less to my family, I do believe the borough should use the already budgeted amount and make the full contract payable for the 170 days via amendment to the current action. I want to thank you all for the pressure you are carrying today and the days coming. I do plead with you to decide today on the action in front of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Musto, are you still online?
Yes, I am, sir. How are you?
Just fine. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Excellent. I would like to address the full school board. I'm sorry I got caught dealing with my child. I know it's been a very long evening, and I've been happy to hear the interactions back and forth.
Mr. Musto, could you state your name for the record, please?
Sorry, Derek Musto, M-U-S-T-O. I am a Teamster representative, and I currently represent the 220 bus employees that transport school to and from school every day for the Mat-Su. As most of you probably already recognize my name, I've emailed all of you at least twice and put in phone calls. We have not, unfortunately, connected. I wanted to address a couple things that came up today and also clear a couple of the records. I think that one thing that we're missing with all of this is what is the language in the federal bill. The federal bill states that you should pay to the greatest state practicable. The greatest state practicable is the amount of money that you've already been funded by Deeds. I spoke with Deeds, Heidi, the director, and she stated that she has told every school district to continue paying the full amount as normal to make sure that the drivers are covered, or make sure that they pay the school bus employees in full directly. That's the part that has not been discussed in this, that's been the direction. So I think that you already have the money. We want to make sure that these employees are not harmed. We've been continually working with First Student on this, but I think what we need to make sure that we're doing is that we're paying the full rate minus fuel to make sure these employees are covered. Some people are going to get a little bit better off on unemployment. However, there is a lot of unknowns. I've spent very long time with the unemployment office. The unemployment office is still not sure for a part-time employee how that additional federal money would apply. Somebody may or may not get that $600, or it may be prorated. As of today, the unemployment office is still not sure what the answer for that is. So I wanted to address these different things. I also wanted to tell you that that letter, written the way that it is, has some inaccurate information in it. If you use the date that is in there, you're going to harm every employee that's out there, because during that time they were on unemployment. So that date is going to need to be adjusted, I believe, about 2 weeks forward to the first day of school. I thank you for your time. I'm also here to answer any questions on this issue, and I encourage you to do the right thing. You have the money. The money's already there. It's already been said by the state that you're not going to be penalized. I encourage you to do the right thing and take care of our community. Thank you.
Okay, is there any members from the audience that wish? Please approach the podium and state your name, please.
My name is Eugene Carl Heyman. I live in the Matsu Valley. Alaska resident for over 43 years, 20 of those years resident in Anchorage. I'd like to remind you, the last 3 school board meetings in this, you've met every week. The last meeting you had was these items on the non-agenda items, non-action items, excuse me. There was no contracts available for the public to see or for you to see. There were the school board members present, says, why don't we have copies of it? And then it became part of the packet for tonight. But when did it become part of the packet tonight? In the start of the administration, before public comment, said these words, 6:53 tonight. They've uploaded it yesterday. What did they upload yesterday? If you take a look at those resolutions, you'll see differences in language in those resolutions, different from the previous week. You're known to have non-action items 1 meeting, and then 2 weeks later, then you take action. But what we're getting is administration is basically running a program where last second this information becomes, there's not even a hard copy in this room for those contracts, for not a single hard copy. Yes, it's online, but when did it become? And is that uphill loaded in yesterday, mean that was also the contracts? I remind you there were several hundred pages on some of those contracts. That's a lot of reading. And I noticed a lot of the conversation you had in asking questions, a lot of it was comments, and you need to restrict it to just questions, and that creates a problem because you need to hear from the public before you proceed. So we've got a problem here. Problem is I've also heard remarked that concerned me greatly is the words from the attorney, the school district attorney, that about not reading the contract. You had a lot of conversation with attorney not reading the contract before them. That's a problem too. Also, the resolution, you had administration here informing you about the resolution, but you were asking questions to the attorney, but he couldn't answer that very resolution that's before you tonight, and then the administration had to fill in. You're having a conversation with an attorney without the information in front of them? That becomes really deeply concerning. So what do? We've got a problem here. We need to act in a situation that we need to be part of the community. We need to be concerned of each other and not go on its own. And this situation, the way this thing's been brought to you, has created a situation is fairness, I believe in process, but look what's happened. Whereas the process has been completely broken. And that puts serious questions. And I've seen, respectively, you've got a lot of questions. And when did that information get to you and the public for us to review? So what do? We need to help each other. I'll leave you with that comment. We need to help each other. But we need to be concerned about how it was brought to you. And just one thing, the key thing that I saw missing blank was what are the costs, the savings, and all that? That should have been part of the picture. We should need to know what the costs and the costs of experience and what are the savings, and that should have been a written report. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Seeing none, we're going to move back to board discussion. Does anyone else? Oh, excuse me, Dr. Welton has a comment.
But I just hope that we can all think about when things go back to whatever becomes the new normal. We're thinking about things right now, which we need to. We're thinking about crisis, but we are also in the process of developing, the 1-year extension for the contract, and we need to be sure that it's possible that we can maintain a good relationship, because we had heard that they had previously said no to an extension, and then they are open to an extension. And so I ask that we look at the issues beyond just this particular thing right now, but also, it's looking at the community again. What is good for our community? And if you are only interested in the bottom line, that's one thing. But if you're interested in people, and you're interested in how the community works, and we have this little sign up here that says, "Is it good for children?" We know that many of our employees have children in the school district or grandchildren. We know that the bus employees have children and grandchildren in the district. We also know that the community relies on the education of their children for safety and taking care of the community. We also know that the economic impact of making people whole or partially whole on the whole community helps everyone out. And I really ask you to think about, you may be sitting pretty well. You may never have had to worry about counting the items that go on your grocery cart, or putting half of it back because you realize you really can't afford it. I want you to think about that. And yes, there are safety nets, but we're all in a place where we're not sure about tomorrow. And if we lose our health, we've really lost. And our health is a part of all of this. That's my comment.
And Mr. Berge, Mr. Larson.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
On my initial go on this contract, I said I would not vote for this contract because I firmly believed I did not have the information necessary in order to make a informed decision on the 1.4 million or how much money it is, and in addition. And I appreciate the information coming forward from Saul Freeman, and I believe we should have had or somehow had that information comparing to us. But I understand that things have changed so drastically, even over a week, to where that contract, the federal stimulus plan came in over the weekend, and there's a lot of unknowns. But I really appreciate this dialogue that we're having and had, that it will create me to make a informed decision, which will be positive, because I have the information, whereas originally that information wasn't at hand. And I appreciate very much the detailed information that Mr. Ponder drew up, Mr. Hart, Mr. Taylor, and yourself and the rest of the board members were able to bring forward through Mr. Falk and Mr. Freeman, and I appreciate that. And that's my comments. Thank you.
President Berge?
Yes, Mr. Ponder.
Hey, I just wanted to make note that the information has been great and very thorough. Also, want to make note that the legal counsel that I feel the board has received has been superb, and I don't know that the record is going to properly reflect that based off comments post our discussion. But the bottom line is, I look at this and I am prepared to move forward with it. If I were looking at this from Bunker and Glacier View, however, I feel like there would be some serious inconsistencies from what I heard tonight. I've heard that, we've been encouraged and even, some provisions perhaps placed that we fulfill the contract. And so for us to say that, we're doing that with a provision in first student, but yet we're bringing Bunker and Glacier View down, I don't fully understand why it was brought down if we're saying we're going to follow the contracts. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Ponder, we're going to have Mr. Fulp clarify a little bit for you here.
Yes, Mr. Ponder, what we've ensured with the Glacier View and Bunker contracts is that there's a consistency with the first student MOA. So the reason why there was an inconsistency to begin with is because when we originally bid these contracts in 2016, we had no provision for a route guarantee for days less than 170. First Student was the only contractor that came back and said, we need to have that in the agreement before we sign. Bunker and Bunker never said that to us. Glacier View never said that to us. So therefore, we only have one contract with a route guarantee for days less than 170. That's First Student. When we looked at this and looked at trying to create consistency and parity between the three bus contractors, we said if we're going to bring up an MOA before the board to pay First Student 82.5% of their daily rate, then we should be bringing MOAs before the board for Glacier View and Bunker for 82.5% of their contracted daily rate as well, and that's what you see before you. The reason why theirs was different to begin with is because they didn't have the route guarantee in there. Otherwise, these are consistent.
Any further comments from the board?
Yes, President Berge, this is Member Hart.
Go ahead, Mr. Hart.
Before we go to vote, I just want to remind everybody that these are not district employees, that we're stepping in for companies on their employees' behalf. This is not the role of the school district. It's the reason we went to contracting is to wash our hands of the school buses, and that includes the employees. Now, I don't wish ill on the employees. I've been unemployed. To Dr. Welton's point, I've been unemployed, and I know it's painful. But we have to think about the purpose of the money that we were given. Yes, it was for bus contracts, but this is not our place to take care of somebody else's employees. It's not the proper place. This is a slippery slope. It's not a good idea for us to start setting precedents in something like this. But my prayers are with the families affected. I know the pain. I've been there. But this is just not proper. Anyway, thank you.
Any further discussion?
President Berge, Ryan Ponder.
Yes, Mr. Ponder.
I just want to ask this is my last question or statement for that matter. Whether it's Mr. Friedman or Mr. Fulp, multiple times there was statements made tonight that we are supposed to follow the contract. The state has encouraged. I'm understanding that the federal government is saying that contracts need to be fulfilled. And can you just make a clarifying statement on what the state has said in regards to contracts and what the feds have said about contracts? And that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Fulp, can you repeat what you said before about what the state has said?
Yes, Heidi Teschner, the Director of Finance and Support Services for the Department of Education and Early Development, said that our position has been, since DEED has paid the final pupil transportation payment for the fiscal year, Districts are encouraged to continue paying on their contract so bus drivers will get paid, or paying bus drivers directly if it is a district-operated program.
Excellent. That's the state. Thank you. And then on the federal side?
On the federal side, we have the stimulus bill, which, and I will just pulling that up on my computer again, which says that if the state if the districts are receiving funds under the stimulus package, then to the greatest extent practical, it is to continue paying its employees and its contractors. It doesn't talk about the specifics of any contract. It just says pay its contractors. So it does not have the specificity, Mr. Ponder, that you would like, and I would like as well. But what we are doing is we are meeting the intent of that language, which is, in our view, under this section, to make sure the employees are receiving income when they're not working because of the shutdown by the federal government.
And Mr. Freeman, did you say if the state is receiving stimulus or the district is receiving stimulus?
Well, it says both. It says a local education agency, the state, or any other entity that receives funds under the Education Stabilization Fund. So it's inclusive of, from our perspective, both the district and the state must, to the greatest extent practicable, continue to pay its employees and contractors during the closure related to the coronavirus.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion at this time? Hearing none, it is time to vote, and we will be conducting this via voice vote.
And we're going to just vote on the first one? Are we going
We are voting on the MOA for first student.
Can you read that into the record?
Okay, we are voting on item A, the MOA for first student contract. Okay, voice vote. Mr. Larson.
Yes.
Mr. Ponder.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Dr. Welton.
Yes.
And I myself vote yes. Item A, the MOA for first student contract, passes unanimously. Moving on to item B, MOA for bunker and bunker contract. Do we have a motion to any second?
I move item B, MOA for bunker and bunker contract.
Is there a second?
Second. This is Mr. Larson.
Okay, the motion, MOA for bunker and bunker contract, has been moved and seconded. Do we have an admin report? Are we still good?
We're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay. Is there public comment at this time? Mr. Musto, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Is there any, do you wish to still comment on the bunker and bunker contract?
Yes, sir, I would. My name is Derek Musto. I am a Teamster Local 959 representative. I do not represent nor work with Bunker and Bunker. I would like to reiterate my comments that were stated earlier regarding this. As I said before, the date on the MOA would potentially put people in jeopardy due to employees being on unemployment at that time. I also have concerns that this MOA is not in compliance I think that we should be paying all of our contractors the full rate minus fuel to make sure that the employees receive the most during this pandemic. I also have concerns that unemployment is being relied on for some, and we still do not have answers from the unemployment division. I attempted to contact every board member and the administrator regarding this issue, and to date, no one has responded to those attempts. Thank you.
Is there any member of the audience wish to approach? Please approach the podium and state your name.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman, Alaska resident for over 43 years, resident of the Valley now, but Anchorage resident 20 years previously. You can take what I said at the early item and ditto, same concerns. And as far as the public and school board, you should not have been placed in the position in getting this thing. It wasn't. The comment that was said by a school board member, this information is great. Well, information great with attorneys not having familiar with what's before them, and they had to have assistance from administration and clarification. That's not good. And the thing is, when did we all get this information? When I say we, the school board, members of the public, when did we all get this? Is this going to be a new pattern for the future? I realize we are dealing with an emergency. Respect. And Superintendent, you got a tough job, and it's a hard job. And I've seen a lot of careful thought in how you've approached it on many of the items. But this is not the way to win confidence. Win confidence with the public in where we're going. We need to have that appropriate conversation. You need to have that information before you, not last minute. And you shouldn't have had to dig so hard to get verbal communications on mounts and stuff like that. Should have been in paper before you, not last minute, like yesterday. That's not the way to go. But we need to move forward. And we're in emergency, and we need to deal with emergency. We need to, as I said before, we need to bring our community together and support each other. Thank you.
Is there any board discussion on item B, the MOA for bunker and bunker contract? Hearing none, it is time for a voice vote. Starting with Mr. Ponder.
Yes.
Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Dr. Welton.
Yes.
I myself vote yes. Mr. Larson.
Yes.
Item B, the MOA for bunker and bunker contract, passes unanimously. Moving on to item C, the MOA for Glacier View transport contract. Do I have a motion and a second?
This is Member Trimmer. I move item C, MOA for Glacier View transportation contract.
Second.
Member Taylor, I second it.
Okay, that motion was moved by Mr. Trimmer and seconded by Dr. Welton. Dr. Goyette, admin report.
We're happy to answer questions. We have no further information.
Thank you. Moving on to public comment. Mr. Musto, are you still with us?
Sir, I am.
Okay, you have 3 minutes if you'd like.
My name is Derek Musto. I am the Teamster representative for the Mat-Su Borough. I do not have association with Glacier View. However, I did want to reiterate my comments or have them apply from the MOA for First Student as well as Bunker and Bunker to Glacier View. Please make note of my points regarding the effective date to not harm employees on unemployment. I also believe that this is still not in compliance with the CARE Act as well as the directive from HEED. I appreciate your consideration, and I have emailed you on this topic. Thank you.
Okay, is there any member of the audience who wishes to proceed? Come up to the podium. Thank you.
Eugene Carl Haberman. I'll be very, very brief. You can take my previous remarks in the last two items and use them for this. And that's all I have to say, and remind you that I am the self-appointed government watchdog, and I'm on my anniversary on April 4th, completing 8 years. Thank you very much.
Okay, is there any board discussion on this item? Hearing none, it is time for a voice vote, starting with Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Dr. Welton.
Yes.
I myself vote yes. Mr. Larson.
Yes.
And Mr. Ponder.
Yes.
Item C, the MOA for Glacier View Transportation Contract passes unanimously. Moving on to item D, First Student Pupil Transportation 1-year contract extension. Is there a motion and a second?
I'll move item D, First Student Pupil Transportation 1-year contract extension.
And a second?
Member Trimmer, second.
Okay, item D has been moved and seconded. Do we have an admin report, Dr. Goyette?
Yes, I'd like to hand it over to Assistant Superintendent Fulton.
Yes, thank you. Due to the unique challenges brought about by COVID-19 and its impact on the pupil transportation industry, administration is recommending an extension of the current First Student Pupil Transportation contract for the 2021-2022 school year. If this contract extension is approved, RFP number B20-14, Pupil Transportation Services, will be canceled and re-released for a 10-year term commencing July 1, 2022.
Do we have public comment? Mr. Musto, are you still on?
Yes, I am, sir.
Okay, if you like, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. As stated previously, my name is Derek Musto. I work for Teamsters Local 959. I currently represent 220 school bus employees that service the Mat-Su Valley. I encourage passing this contract extension. Working with First Student, we've been able to maintain labor harmony and improve benefits for residents of the Mat-Su Valley, and I would appreciate your consideration to pass this. Thank you.
Okay, is there any members of the audience wish to please approach the bench?
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I live in the Mat-Su Valley, 43-year Alaska resident, 20 of those years in Anchorage. You can take all the comments I said before and use it for this, but I'd like to add one more point, and it'll be very brief. I realize we're in an emergency, and it's very hard for all of us. Every day we don't know what the future is. So when we get outside this emergency, which hopefully will be sooner than later, and we kind of get back to a more less insane world and a less insane situation, you all need to take a look at all the items that you're approving this one. If you approve this one and the others, you need to get a full accounting of the whole thing. Right now, it's difficult for anything to do about any accounting, but there needs to be a good accounting and an audit. And that's all I have to say, but I would not stop you from proceeding on these measures. In favor. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, is there any board discussion on... Oh, yes, ma'am, one more.
Hi, my name is Christine Spinelli. As an employee of First Student, I support maintaining the contract with First Student. It is common knowledge that new companies replace management. Our current management and staff are wonderful people. They have a newly strong relationship with pupil transportation. Over the past 3 years, we have had a yearly management change. With the likely loss in employees due to COVID-19, risking management changes and company policy, I believe will make a hectic environment. I truly believe our current staff and management and company will bring us out smoother from COVID 19. This in turn will reduce employee turnover, making safer transportation for my kids, your kids, and our community kids. Thank you.
Any other members of the audience? Okay, board discussion?
This is Mr. Larson.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
Looking at the chart that we have in our packet for first student transportation rates over the years, can I please get an explanation why in fiscal 18 the rate went up 0.4%, fiscal 19 0.5%, and fiscal 20, the one that we're going to vote on, 3%. Why did the rate go up 5 times what the normal rates were for a 1-year extension?
Yes, through the chair, Member Larson, the rates are increased each year based on Anchorage CPIU, so that is something that's specified within the contract for annual renewals. And so when we go out to bid, we get that initial first-year rate, and then each successive year is based on Anchorage CPIU as measured by the U.S. Department of Labor Bureau of Statistics.
So 3%, the last 2 years has been 0.4, 19.5, and you're saying that this year we've increased the CPI in Anchorage to 3% increase?
From FY19 to FY20. So the contract that's before you is the increase that we would agree to at 3.4% between FY21 and FY22.
You said the 3% increase is based on what again?
The change in Anchorage CPIU.
And you're saying the Anchorage CPIU is 3%?
It was this past year.
And how much is that money for that 3%? How much will that be for the fiscal 20, addition to our already deficit?
We are in fiscal year 20, so fiscal year 20 rates have been budgeted for.
I'm sorry, for 2021. Is the 3%?
We have not finalized what the rate will be for the renewal for FY21. We look at the Anchorage CPIU and we adjust it, and the contractor agrees to that.
And you don't know what that rate is?
We believe it's 1.4. We just have not finalized that, so I'm hesitant to speak with total confidence on that number on the spot.
I'm just kind of curious how the rate can go 0.5 to 3 back to 1.5. That's just kind of strange. I'm sorry. But
yeah, it's the way that the U.S. Department of Labor Bureau of Statistics measures market basket items, and they use Anchorage as the hub. It has been, when we were facing the recession, they were much lower numbers, and then for whatever reason, it jumped up to 3% between FY19 and FY20.
Because if I look, and I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not saying that you're wrong or anything like that. It's just kind of weird because we're still in a recession, but that's okay. You answered my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions from the board? Hearing none, it is time for a voice vote. Mr. Trimmer?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Dr. Welton?
Yes.
I myself vote yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Ponder?
Yes.
And Mr. Hart?
Yes.
And item D, the first student pupil transportation 1-year contract extension passes unanimously. Moving on to item E, FY21 school board meeting schedule draft. Do I have a motion and a second?
I move item E. Fiscal year 21 school board meeting schedule draft.
Is there a second?
This is Mr. Larson, second.
Is there an admin report?
Yes, this was brought up several weeks ago, and since then we had to cancel our Butte visit that was in May. So we are recommending for next school year, when we do, the school board does 2 outreach meetings, that the September meeting is at Butte Elementary, and then in the spring, in May, out at Houston, and hopefully the board will be able to get a tour of what the facility is, the Houston High School renovation.
Thank you. Is there any public comment at this time? Yes, Mr. Taberman.
My name is Eugene Carl Heyman, Alaska resident for over 43 years, currently resident in the Valley. This was brought up before as a non-action item. When this was brought up, it was missing about other locations in this document. But also, let's note, we're in a different situation right now. Do we know what the future is? Do we know what 3 or 4 months from now we're going to be doing? I strongly encourage you to keep all your meetings like you have them right now at this time, and not do some schedule like saying we're going to be in Butte in September or whatever. Let's be frank. We need to connect with the people, and I strongly appreciate the school district, school board, in they're allowing public having that presence here and allowing opportunity for the public to speak on the phone. That's vital. Have that conversation with the people before you make a decision. But the technology you have is awesome here, but I don't think you're going to be as good in doing remote phone calls. So you got to consider that. The other thing is you need to move away from the idea of work sessions. Have it in this room, not a conference room. It's not going to work anymore now. Things have changed. Contact, closeness, and all that. You need to be here, and the public needs to be facing you, not some of you having the backs to the public in a very small room. That has to stop. And don't call them work sessions. Call them a meeting, and then have a chance for the public to be heard. Because those work sessions don't allow, at least they should allow, but you don't allow a place for the public comment. There's no place in that room anymore. It should stop. Also is there needs to be a real need to have a more appropriate conversation with the people. And the suggestions I made right now, please do that. And work better with the way the materials are getting out to you and the members of the public. Because wherever you hold the meeting, if the information is not before the public appropriately, how can you make appropriate decision? And before that, how can you possibly hear from the public? But I'll stress this key point. You do have an awesome technology department here for this room. Keep it. It's a good investment. It helps connecting with the people. And with 41 seconds to spare, thank you very much.
Is there any board discussion concerning this item?
This is Mr. Larson.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
I realize we adjust the calendar as we go. I just want to remind the board that the January 6th meeting, 2021, is 2 days after the Christmas holiday break, and I don't think we've ever had that meeting, although it stays on the calendar. I assume we can just adjust it.
Saul Friedman
has left.
We can adjust that as we go along next year, and also just to let people know that Snowshoe has never been visited, and it is somewhat remote also, just to keep that in your back of your mind. Thank you.
Is there any other comment from the board? Hearing none, we are going to go ahead and vote at this time. Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Dr. Welton?
Yes.
I myself vote yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Ponder?
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes.
Item E, FY21 School Board Meeting Schedule Draft passes unanimously. Moving on to item 8, non-action items. Contract award to Sheet Metal Inc. bid number B20-02 Trapper Creek Elementary School Direct Digital Controls Upgrade. Do we have an admin report?
Assistant Superintendent Fulp.
Yes. On January 29, 2020, bid number B20-02 was issued for direct digital controls upgrade at Trapper Creek Elementary School. Mechanical contractor Sheet Metal Inc. was determined to be the lowest qualified bidder. The contractor will perform mechanical upgrades to the existing hydronic heating system, piping, boiler piping, and controls, baseboard heating, fans, and air supply system. These upgrades will allow for remote access to monitoring and control of heating and ventilation systems. Per Board Policy 3312, all contracts for professional services over $200,000 must be approved or ratified by the school board. This contract amount for the base contract is $269,330.
Is there any public comment at this time on this item? Seeing none, is there any board discussion at this time? Hearing none, moving on to item B, the 6-year Capital Improvement Program CIP list. Is there an admin report?
Yes, Executive Director Mike Brown will come up to the podium.
Good evening, Mike Brown, Executive Director of Operations for the district. Tonight we're going to present to you the 6-year CIP. So I'm going to move to this slide, but the attached 6-year capital improvement plan or program meets the State Department of Education and Early Development's annual requirement for a 6-year CIP. This list, if approved, allows district staff to submit FY 2022 projects to DEED for grant consideration. Grant applications are due to DEED by September 1st of each year. The projects included on the FY 2022 list represent immediate needs, and all projects included on the list address deferred maintenance needs for existing infrastructure. So I'm just going to address a couple of the highlights on the sheet instead of going through each one individually. But essentially, the top priorities continue to be water systems and roof replacement. Following this summer's repairs on Talkeetna Elementary roof, which the board will recall that discussion earlier this calendar year, we will likely pull this project from next year's list after those repairs are completed. We are working to finalize seismic assessments, and the structural upgrades project will be updated with any new information that comes from those reports. And finally, a portion of the non-structural seismic upgrades will likely be reduced due to hazard mitigation grant program funding that the state recently announced would become available for the district. One of the takeaways is that we are looking for options to address our most immediate needs, whether that is utilizing repairs, extending the useful life of systems, or leveraging alternative funding methods such as the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. This list is also aligned to the moderate funding scenario, I'm moving to the next slide, which is described in the district's facility blueprint. The district's capital planning efforts focus on maintaining the borough's current level of spending for school bond debt, which is approximately 1.08 mils. These bond issuances do not meet all forecasted deferred maintenance items, but represent the most pressing needs. The moderate scenario assumes that the state will continue to fund past bond debt issuances at the 70% reimbursable rate, while all future issuances would be funded locally without any state reimbursement. This allows for school bond debt issuances approximately every 3 years, and generally each bond package would be in the $30 to $40 million range. As more information becomes known regarding the state's support for past and future school bond debt contributions, the CIP will be updated. As you know, we bring this to you on an annual basis. So that's a quick overview of the program, and then when you refer to the actual 6-year CIP itself, it is a 6-year plan. You only see 2 years represented there because we've zeroed out those other years within the 6. So it really reduces it down to at least in theory 2 $30 to $40 million bond packages spaced in between by 3 years. Subject to your questions, that's all I have.
Is there any public comment at this time on this item?
My name is Eugene Cole-Haberman. I live in the Metsu Valley. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, the decision made by the governing body is more like public interest. With regards to the 6-year capital improvement plan, I'm glad you have a plan, but I don't think it's very realistic. We should really figure out what situation we're in financially right now. What could we possibly have available in the next 6 years? Because we've been warned for the last several years, we've been taken out of the rainy day account. Year after year, I've been saying it right here before the school board, your school board year, and previous school boards, instead of tackling the issue. Now we got this plan, but we also got to realize is where's the money going to come from? Is there going to be matching with state? Is the borough going to have money for any of this stuff? But I also get concerned is we also, whatever we do, we get it wisely use that money and make it go as far as possible for the welfare of the community. And we cannot just throw money away. And what concerns me is I've yet to see this. I see the seismic mentioned here on several lines here, but I've yet to see an appropriate response with the Metro School District instead of waiting for later to determine seismic risk of all the schools in the school district before we go and venture into build and so forth. And we've gone that direction without the other. So that concerns me because we can make mistakes. We cannot make mistakes in such a way that results in a negative situation for the safety of the staff, the teachers, and the public. And again, I remind you, we don't have money to burn away. We're realizing it more now, and we're a international World Health emergency, and we haven't even identified clearly what the costs are right now financially and what the school district is going through right now. We're not got that report. So to hear a 6-year report, capital plan, get real. It's not real. It's not realistic. We're not looking at ourselves where we're really going to have to need and what we need to do in those 6 years. And also, what really will be the population in the borough. Remind you, years before, when there was a massive exodus of people that left Alaska. And that could happen again, but in summation, this time we may be stopped because we can't get on a plane and we cannot cross the border like we did before. And again, I wish you all the best. And we carefully think things out carefully because we can't afford to make mistakes. We all can. Thank you. With 12 seconds to spare.
Is there any board discussion or questions that you might have for Mr. Brown?
It's Mr. Larson.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
Mr. Brown, this CIP list goes to the state, try to get bond money. Have we ever received any bond money from the state?
Through the chair to Mr. Larson, in the past, yes. This year, I believe, actually next year, we will have been, basically it'll have been 10 years since our last bond issuance. This plan does not assume that the state will provide any bond debt reimbursement moving forward.
Does this, I'm sorry, I probably said that wrong. This goes to try to seek grant money, but there's no grant money either. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, my mistake. Yes, this is for grant submissions, correct. And we haven't received funding for that in, as far as I've ever been told. But we continue to work those applications and refine those to try to move them up the list. And we've been successful in doing that, but the likelihood that we will receive grant funding, it's probably pretty remote, but we're going to continue to work the state process because that's the process they've made available to the school district.
Yeah, that's correct. So, yeah, we've never received grant money from the state, and we probably never will. But I appreciate the hard work that goes into this to show our needs, and hopefully we can come up with the money in a couple of years so we can get these things done, because these projects will become pretty dire if we don't address them. Is that in a few years? Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's a fair assessment.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Brown? Thank you. Moving on to item 9, persons to be heard on non-agenda items. Madam Secretary?
That the speaker states his or her name for the record. You're limited to 3 minutes, and it's per meeting, and you're limited to non-agenda items. The rest of it is all to be nice and remember not to disparage employees. Thank you.
Mr. Musto, are you still with us?
Good evening. Yes, I am.
You have 3 minutes, if you like, on non-agenda items.
Thank you. I know it's late. My name is Derek Musto. I am a Teamster representative that works again with 220 school bus employees in the Mat-Su Valley, as well as hundreds more scattered throughout the valley and the borough. I wanted to take the time tonight to talk about communication. The last board meeting, there were various board members that spoke positively about communication and that we have received emails in correspondence. Unfortunately, in my situation, I've not had a positive interaction. I've emailed the board multiple times, made phone calls, and not received any communication response. Dealing with public officials, I've never experienced this before. I think that tonight's board meeting could have been much more efficient and streamlined if there would have been some additional communications. And while I'm offering criticism, I do want to caveat it with a statement that I don't take pride in having this statement tonight to the board. I have worked well with the school district. We would like to continue working well with the school district, and I just think that open communication is always the best manner, trying to never forget what we're doing. We're working for the residents of the borough and trying to make sure that the end user, the people, the students, the children, the workers are taken care of, and not necessarily get lost in the weeds on, funding here, funding there, or anything of that nature. So in the future, I hope the communication would be better, and I will definitely keep my door open, and I'm sure that we'll be having more in the days and weeks to come, specifically related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much. It's been a very well done board meeting this evening, and a lot of very good information was put out there. Thank you again. Have a good night.
Is there any member of the audience who wishes to address the board? Yes, Mr. Haverman.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I live in the Mat-Su Valley. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, the decision made by the governing body is more likely in the public interest. First, I'd like to compliment, because I have been providing constructive criticism this evening. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do like to applaud that you have this meeting open to the public. I realize there's limitations. You've allowed for the public also opportunity to call in, and I applaud you for that. And you're one of the few places that rare places that I can physically come and see you. Last night I was at a city council meeting in Palmer. They were doing interviews for city manager position. So a member of the public in that room was me. There was an opportunity for the public to be heard, be there, and that was great. You, over the last several weeks, have been holding meetings in this room. That's vital. I know it's hard for you all, but you figured it out in the best way for the safety of the public and safety of the staff and safety of the board. And I applaud you on that. I also applaud a few weeks ago with the presentation and updates by the superintendent on coronavirus. That's very important. I only have one little slight thing. In the last 2 meetings in the superintendent's report, it just referred to the website. You've been very thoughtful on the issue with respect. The public needs not just to look at the website, but to hear from you. Hear from you in these meetings on that issue instead of referring to the website. You've done a great job, and you've shown careful thought on the issue. And I encourage you to do it, what you've done a couple of meetings ago, instead of refer to the website. Just report to us and the public, because this is on our minds every day, and we don't know when it's going to end. But your words are very important, because that conversation the public is hearing, and we need to hear from you, with all due respect. So I close with, I got 54 seconds left. Just a footnote for the record. The borough is going to have an assembly meeting next week. That's going to be remote. I have problems with that idea. And I don't think, there was a reference to comment from the superintendent in the previous meeting. I guess I don't miss much of limitations. Is there a limitation to the number of calls that come in? Okay, good. Glad to hear that. Thank you for correcting. And whoever didn't see that, the superintendent says no. That means there's no limitations. So that's great. But we're hearing that there are limitations to the borough assembly meeting. I remind you, there's over 100,000 people that live in the valley. So, and then that's it. And wish you the best. And thank you very much.
Moving on to item 10, future items, future business, upcoming meetings. April 8th, 2020, 6 p.m., the regular school board meeting will be at Mat-Su Borough Central Office. On April 14th, 2020, 1 p.m., a special meeting executive session for the superintendent search will be at the MSBSD Central Office. April 15th, 2020, 6 p.m., the regular school board meeting, MSBSD Central Office, and that will be moving to via teleconference. And April 22, 2020, 6 p.m., regular school board meeting, Mat-Su Borough Central Office via teleconference. Moving on to item 11, correspondence and board committee reports. Any correspondence, Superintendent? Have any board members received any correspondence or been to any committees? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 12, comments from the school board and the administration. Dr. Goyette?
Assistant Superintendent Spargo?
Thank you. No, I don't have any comments.
Assistant Superintendent Fulp?
No comments, thank you.
I have no comments either.
Ms. Jensen, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any final comments?
Yes. I'd like to thank everyone that was able to participate in our call tonight from the public. It's always great to hear public comment, and even more so now that we can't have all of our meetings at the central offices. I'd also like to thank everyone that did an administrative report and all of the robust discussion that we had tonight. It's great to be able to work through those problems and realize what we're taking action on. On top of that, very easy to follow up precedent and very hard to set a new one. So I'd like to thank everyone, adult and student alike, that has taken on that task. It's a very massive undertaking, and it takes a lot of work. So thank you to everyone that has helped in the adaptations right now. Thank you.
Mr. Larson?
Thank you. I want to thank Amy Spargo for her extensive report tonight. That was very informative, and I really do appreciate it, as well as all the other administrative reports. I do want to thank everybody for the extensive and needed conversation on the MOAs. That was where the information could flow out a little bit tonight. Also, I want to thank Student Representative Jensen. It's good to hear your voice, and I'm glad that you guys will come up with a way to elect your future president and so forth on your student body. We should just turn the whole thing over to you anyway, and the students, because I'm sure you're all tech savvy and you could figure it all out on distance learning anyway. Congratulations on Amy Spargo also on retiring. You'll enjoy it. I do. it'll be a new door for you to open up, and we will miss you dearly. Thank you.
Mr. Ponder.
Yes, I would just like to offer my continued accolades to the offering the continued accolades to the school district administration, staff, teachers, everybody. Just pure champions on acting so quickly and flexible with everything that's come at them. Super impressed. It's very, very commendable. So really appreciate that. I do want to just make one statement as far as offering up a consideration and suggestion that I kind of feel is kind of an order from the government, and that is, in regards to how we're meeting. I know that we had planned to meet and kind of do it the same way we had met last time. However, since last Wednesday, there were orders that were issued, and those orders would have suggested that flexibility and kind of changing the way things are done. So hopefully in the next meeting, we can utilize Mandate 11 that
You
was
are
published
muted.
on. Hello. Oh.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Oh, I guess that's government censoring right there. Muted. Don't like what he's saying. Sorry. Nonetheless, Mandate 11, where public government services can continue on, does state that all individuals shall cease participation in public or private gatherings. And tonight, the FAQs for that health mandate came out, stating that personal travel is prohibited except as necessary to meet critical personal needs or work in critical infrastructure jobs. So anybody that we're opening up public comment to in the live would be in violation to this mandate that's come out, or at least a clarification tonight. So hopefully we can kind of switch that and get all of our comments and everybody, staff and administration, home safe as much as possible, and take all the comments via modern technology. So, in the meeting. Thank you. That's all.
Mr. Trimmer. Member Trimmer, are you still with us?
Yeah, my dogs are barking. Sorry. I enjoyed the in-depth discussion. I'm glad that we had the ability to do that and clarify everything that we could earlier. And thank you, Mr. Friedman, for showing up and helping us out there. And I really did appreciate Mrs. Spargo's presentation, and appreciate the challenges that everybody's dealing with in the district to make things as good as they can be. I know it's a challenge to get all the students to do what they need to do, and hopefully more and more will be able to get online and get things done as this goes on. I know it's a challenge just at our house with 3 kids, so I hope that the parents can persevere and get through all of that. So otherwise, everybody follow the mandate. So hopefully we can get through this. I just feel like the more people will follow the rules, the sooner we can be through this. So thank you. Have a good night.
Mr. Taylor.
I just want to make a quick say thank you. Being firsthand witness to 3 students, and one in elementary, one in middle school, one in high school, and seeing the response of teachers and administration on their behalf. Just as a parent, I'm grateful, but as a board member, to know that that's going in the lives of thousands of other students, I'm just grateful for the professional people we have who truly love these kids who they're taking care of, and our administration, Ms. Spargo and Mr. Folk. Thank you. Your knowledge that you have and how quickly you can pull it out and share with us is astounding. We asked a lot of questions tonight, answers were given, and just appreciate your professionalism and knowledge that you have. But to the parents out there, thank you. Our kids, I hope families are growing closer together through this issue, through this pandemic, and that they're realizing how important and how special education really is. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Dr. Welton.
I want to thank Ms. Jensen for her report. It was good to hear that the students are trying to figure out how they're going to vote and figure out who's going to represent next year and all of that. I am very sorry for the students that aren't having some of the things that come along with graduation, but I do know that there's going to be great stories in the future of people saying, "Do you remember that year?" I want to thank Mr. Friedman. His ability to help us through this, the contracts was great, fantastic, and I appreciate the time that he spent with us this evening. I want to thank Amy Spargo for the information on the remote learning, and I love that you made the distinction between homeschool and remote learning, because it is very different. And I hope that other people learned that it is very different than homeschooling. And congratulations on your retirement. You will be missed. I was sorry to hear of Mr. Moosey moving to the city of Palmer, and maybe we'll have him show up to our meetings to give reports. I don't know. So we will miss him from the borough. I really want to thank all the legislators for working so hard to get things done so that they could go home to be with their families and ride out the virus and the mandates that are coming up to us. And I do hope that everybody is safe and takes seriously what we have to do. I have lots of projects to work on. I hope you all do too. Thank you.
Mr. Hart.
Yes, thank you. I did receive a call from a concerned grandmother about the graduation. I assured her that that the district's working on options for graduation ceremonies or alternatives to them. And I was pleased to find in the correspondence that we received, an email we received through the school, that indeed they are working on it. Look forward to that. It may not be a bad idea to have a short report on that if there's any progress made. But I know it's a complex issue. But beyond that, stay safe, and hope everybody's doing well.
I'd like to compliment the staff on their continued diligent efforts during these difficult times. Not being able to come to your office, not being able to collaborate face-to-face with coworkers is an additional barrier that makes a difficult job even harder. So I can see that, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad to see that you're living up to the challenge, and at times looks like you're exceeding it. So compliments and hats off to you. Ms. Spargo, all I have to say is 31 years, wow, dedicated to education. That's, what more can one say? I would like to express out to the district to still keep communicating with the public. Correct, positive information is what the public needs to hear, and please keep the lines of communication open. They are, but they just want to reinforce how important that is right now. I hope that we have contact with First Student and make sure that when we move through with our contracts, that if there is a problem with the date with people who have already applied for unemployment, that we're able to work that out. I'm sure that that's going to be such a small issue that we didn't need to stop the process to correct that. So we can go on with that. And then lastly, I'll end with this. The timeline for the contracts, yes, it was quick. The federal legislation was voted on Friday. The staff worked on this through the weekend, and we didn't have final documents until Tuesday, and they were still being finalized. So the movement forward was my call to make sure these things go. So for the board members out there, if any of you had any angst, that relies on my shoulders, and that was my decision alone. So with that, I will say good night, and we do not have an executive session, and I'd like to see a motion and a second for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any objection? Hearing none, we are adjourned.